Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're stepping into a world where history doesn't just live in books, it breathes in the wind, echoes in the stones, and waits silently under the moonlight. In this series, we are exploring a mysterious and breathtaking topic, the night silence of China's ancient Great Wall. The Great Wall of China is one of the most legendary structures ever built by human hands, stretching across mountains, deserts, and deep valleys like a sleeping dragon guarding the heart of an ancient empire. But while most people imagine the Great Wall under bright sunlight with tourists walking along its paths, very few stop to wonder what happens when the sun disappears, when the sky turns dark, and when the Great Wall becomes completely alone. At night, the wall transforms into something entirely different, something haunting, peaceful, and almost supernatural. The air becomes colder, the shadows become longer, and every step feels like it belongs to a forgotten era. Imagine standing on a watchtower high above the mountains, where the only sound you can hear is the wind whistling through broken stones, and far away, the call of an owl cutting through the darkness. The Great Wall, built over centuries by countless hands, holds within its bricks the stories of soldiers who guarded the borders, messengers who ran through dangerous paths, and emperors who dreamed of eternal protection. During the day, the wall looks powerful and proud, but at night, it feels like a living memory, silent, patient, and heavy with secrets. This series is not just about the architecture or the dates of construction. It's about the emotion, the atmosphere, and the hidden stories that people rarely talk about. When darkness covers the mountains, the wall becomes a place of imagination, where you can almost picture torches flickering in the distance, guards whispering warnings, and distant footsteps that may or may not be real. In ancient times, night was not safe the way it is today. There were no bright streetlights, no modern security, no easy communication. The Great Wall at night was a frontier of fear and duty, where one wrong decision could mean danger for an entire region. Soldiers stationed along the wall had to remain alert, scanning the horizon for movement, listening for the sound of approaching horses, and watching for smoke signals from distant towers. The silence was both their enemy and their companion, because in silence, every tiny noise becomes louder, every shadow becomes suspicious, and every moment feels stretched like an endless thread. Yet at the same time, that same silence carried beauty, because above the wall, the night sky was wide and endless, filled with stars that looked like they were scattered by the hands of the gods. The Great Wall wasn't just a barrier. It was a stage where humanity met nature, where ambition met survival, and where history met the unknown. In this series, we will travel through that nighttime world, exploring what the Great Wall might have felt like centuries ago, when the only light came from the moon and the flames of distant torches. We will talk about the lonely watchtowers, the hidden pathways, the chilling mountain winds, and the legends that grew in the darkness. Because every ancient structure has two faces, the one you see in the daylight and the one you feel in the quiet of night. The Great Wall of China is not just a monument. It is a memory carved into the earth, a silent witness to wars, sacrifices, dreams, and endless human effort. And when the world falls asleep, the wall remains awake in its own way, standing tall, listening to the wind, holding the weight of history in complete silence. So get comfortable, turn down the lights, and let your imagination walk along those ancient stones with me. Because tonight, we are not just learning about history. We are stepping into it, hearing its quiet heartbeat, and discovering the haunting beauty of the Great Wall when the world goes silent. Let's begin this journey together. Part 1 begins on a night when the world seems to hold its breath, and the Great Wall of China rises like a dark river of stone across the sleeping mountains. The last traces of sunlight have faded, leaving behind a sky washed in deep blue and ink-black shadows, and the air grows sharper with every passing moment. Far below, the villages are quiet, their lanterns dim, their doors closed, their people wrapped in blankets and dreams. But up here the wall remains awake, stretching endlessly as if it refuses to surrender to time. The ancient stones feel colder at night, not only because the temperature drops, but because the silence settles into every crack and corner, turning the wall into a place where sound becomes rare and precious. Each step along the uneven path produces a soft crunch of gravel and dust, and that small noise feels louder than it should, as though the wall itself is listening. In the distance, a watchtower stands like a lonely guardian, its shape cutting into the night sky, and as you approach it, the wind begins to speak in low whispers, sliding through broken windows and worn-out gaps where soldiers once stood. It is easy to imagine that centuries ago this very tower would have been alive with movement, with the glow of torches, the clink of armor, and the quiet tension of men who understood that the border was not a line on a map, but a living danger that could appear at any moment. Tonight, there are no torches, no guards, and no shouted commands, yet the feeling of vigilance still lingers like a ghostly habit. The Great Wall was built to protect, but protection comes with a cost, and the stones seem to carry that cost in their weight, in their silence, in the way they refuse to crumble completely even after so many generations. The moon rises higher, spilling pale light across the ridges, and suddenly the wall looks less like a ruin and more like a sleeping creature, its spine winding over hills and vanishing into darkness beyond sight. The night silence here is not empty, it is layered, deep, and alive in subtle ways. You can hear the wind sweeping over the mountains like a slow breath, and sometimes the call of a distant bird echoes briefly before fading into nothing. There are moments when the quiet becomes so intense that you begin to notice your own heartbeat, your own breathing, as if the wall has forced you to become aware of your existence in the same way it has existed for centuries, steady, watchful, and alone. People often describe the Great Wall as a symbol of strength, but standing here at night reveals another truth. Strength is not always loud, and endurance is often silent. The wall does not roar or shine. It simply remains, and in that remaining there is something almost sacred. As you walk further, the path narrows, and the stones under your feet become uneven, shaped by weather, by footsteps, by history itself. Some sections are restored, clean and solid, but others are raw and broken, where nature has begun to reclaim what humans once forced into order. Grass grows between the bricks, and small plants cling stubbornly to the edges, proving that even the mightiest walls cannot stop the slow patience of time. Yet even in decay, the wall holds its presence, and at night its presence feels stronger, because there is nothing else to distract the mind. No crowds, no voices, no cameras flashing, only darkness, stone, and the feeling that you are walking through a corridor of memory. It is said that the Great Wall was built by countless laborers, many of whom never returned home, and some legends whisper that their spirits remain trapped within the bricks, bound to the structure they died creating. Whether or not one believes such stories, the atmosphere of the night makes them feel possible, because when you stand in a place where history is so thick, imagination becomes almost unavoidable. The wind that brushes your face could easily be mistaken for a sigh, and the creak of shifting stones might sound like a distant footstep. In ancient times, the men stationed here would have feared the night not because of monsters, but because of what the darkness could hide. Raiders moving quietly, enemy scouts watching from far away, or the sudden flash of a signal fire in the distance warning that danger was approaching. The wall at night was a place where every shadow mattered, and every silence could be a warning. Even now, in a peaceful era, that tension remains like a faint echo. You reach another watchtower, taller than the last, and when you step inside, the air feels different, as if the tower has trapped the cold and the past together. The walls are rough, the floor is dusty, and the openings that once held archers now frame the night like windows into another world. Looking out from this height, you see the walls stretching away, rising and falling with the mountains, disappearing into the black horizon. It is impossible not to feel small, not to feel like a temporary visitor in a place that has outlived empires. The Great Wall has witnessed dynasties rise and fall, has watched armies march and retreat, has endured storms, earthquakes, and endless seasons, and still it stands, refusing to fully disappear. The night makes this truth even more powerful, because in the darkness you cannot measure the wall by sight alone. You measure it by feeling, by imagination, by the weight of its silence pressing gently against your mind. And as the hours pass, you begin to understand that the Great Wall at night is not simply a structure. It is a living atmosphere, a memory that wraps around the mountains like mist. This is the beginning of our journey, and in the next parts we will go deeper into the legends, the hidden stories, and the haunting beauty that comes alive when the Great Wall becomes the quietest place on Earth, where history speaks not through words, but through silence. Part 2 continues deeper into the night, where the Great Wall no longer feels like a destination but a passage into an older world, one that exists between history and imagination. The moon has climbed higher, and its pale light now spreads across the stone like a thin veil, revealing every crack, every worn edge, every scar left by centuries of wind and rain. The silence becomes thicker as you move farther from the restored sections and into the quieter, forgotten stretches where nature has taken back its territory. Here, the wall is not polished or proud. It is rough, broken, and honest, like an ancient warrior who has survived too many battles to care about appearances. The path narrows, and the stones underfoot shift slightly, reminding you that time has loosened what human hands once forced into perfect alignment. The air smells faintly of earth and cold rock, and somewhere far below, a stream whispers through the valley, a soft sound that feels like the wall's heartbeat in the darkness. You pause for a moment, and the stillness around you seems so complete that even the smallest movement feels like an intrusion, as if the Great Wall prefers to be alone with its memories. Yet the more you listen, the more you realize that the night is not truly silent, it is simply subtle. The wind moves like a slow traveler, brushing against the stones and slipping through the gaps where bricks have fallen away, producing a low, uneven hum that rises and fades like distant chanting. Sometimes the wind becomes stronger, and the sound grows sharper, almost like a warning, and you can't help but imagine how terrifying such nights must have been for the ancient soldiers stationed here. They lived in a world without certainty, where danger could emerge from the darkness without warning, where the horizon could hide 1,000 threats. On nights like this, their eyes would have strained to catch movement, their ears would have searched for the faintest clue, and their minds would have fought against fear, because fear was as real as any enemy. The Great Wall was built to separate safety from chaos, but the night blurred that line, turning every shadow into a question. As you continue walking, you come across an abandoned watchtower half-collapsed, its entrance swallowed by rubble and wild plants. The tower looks like a mouth frozen mid-speech, unable to finish the message it once carried. Climbing carefully, you step inside, and the air immediately changes, becoming colder and heavier, as though the stones have trapped centuries of breath within them. The darkness inside is deeper than outside, and for a moment you feel as if you've stepped into the past itself. You imagine the tower filled with men long ago, guards huddled together, sharing quiet conversations to keep themselves awake, listening for distant hoofbeats, holding onto the warmth of their small fires. Their lives were measured not by comfort but by duty, and duty meant enduring nights where the cold could cut through clothing and the silence could sharpen the mind until it felt unbearable. The Great Wall demanded patience, because guarding an empire was not an act of glory every day. Most days were long stretches of waiting, watching, and wondering if the enemy would come. And in that waiting, the night became their companion, a silent teacher that forced them to understand the value of attention. Looking out through a broken opening in the tower, you see the walls stretching onward like a fading line of moonlit stone, and you realize that it was never just one wall. It was a system of survival, a chain of towers and pathways designed to carry messages faster than any rider could travel. Signal fires were the language of the wall, and in the ancient world, a single flame on a distant ridge could mean the difference between preparation and disaster. At night, those flames would have looked like stars falling to earth, bright and urgent against the dark mountains. You imagine the sudden tension that would rise when a guard spotted that light, the quick movement of hands preparing their own fire, the rush of breath, the sharp smell of smoke, and the fear that traveled faster than sound. The Great Wall's night silence was not always peaceful. Sometimes it was the silence before a storm, the quiet before an attack, the pause before history turned violent. But tonight, the wall remains calm, and that calm feels almost eerie. The wind continues to move, carrying the scent of pine trees and distant soil, and above you the sky is filled with countless stars, far more than most people ever see in modern cities. It is easy to forget the present when the night sky looks so ancient, as if it belongs to the same era as the wall itself. You walk again, and your footsteps become a rhythm, steady and slow, like a ritual. The wall curves around the mountains, sometimes climbing steeply, sometimes descending into valleys, and each rise feels like stepping into another chapter of a story that has no end. You notice how the stones reflect the moonlight differently depending on their age and condition. Some are smooth, others jagged, some darkened by centuries of weather, others lighter as if they were placed yesterday. This mixture of old and new makes the wall feel like a living timeline, a structure that contains many generations at once. And in the night, when everything is stripped down to shadows and light, you begin to sense something deeper than history. There is a feeling here that cannot be explained easily, a quiet pressure in the air, as if the wall remembers every voice that ever spoke along its path, every cry of warning, every whispered prayer, every final breath. Legends say the wall is haunted not by evil spirits, but by the echoes of human sacrifice, because building such a monument required more than stone. It required lives, sweat, and endless suffering. Whether or not the spirits are real, the emotion is real, and standing here in the night makes that emotion impossible to ignore. You look down at the valleys and realize how far the wall stands from ordinary life, how isolated it is, how perfectly it was placed to watch the world. In that isolation, the night silence becomes a mirror, reflecting your own thoughts back at you. It forces you to feel the weight of time, the fragility of human ambition, and the strange beauty of endurance. The Great Wall does not speak with words, but with presence, and its presence grows stronger when the world is asleep. As Part 2 comes to an end, you continue forward into the darkness, knowing that the deeper you go, the more the wall will reveal, not through loud stories, but through the quiet, haunting language of the night. Part 3 takes us to the hour when the night feels oldest, when the sky is at its darkest, and even the moonlight seems tired, spreading thinly across the mountains like a fading promise. The Great Wall stands higher now, climbing a ridge where the wind is stronger and colder, and every gust feels like a hand pushing against your chest, reminding you that this place was never meant to be gentle. The stones beneath your feet are uneven, some cracked, some missing, and the path demands slow, careful steps, as if the wall itself wants you to move with respect. In the distance, the silhouette of another watchtower rises like a black tooth against the sky, and as you approach it, the silence becomes so intense that your mind begins to fill it with imagined sounds. A shifting shadow becomes a passing figure, a distant echo becomes a whispered warning, and for a moment you understand why ancient people believed that the night was filled with unseen forces. The Great Wall at night does not need ghosts to feel haunted. Its history is heavy enough to create that feeling on its own. Inside the watchtower, the air is colder, trapped and unmoving, and the darkness feels deeper, like the walls have swallowed centuries of secrets. You step toward an opening and look out, and the view steals your breath. The wall stretches across the mountains in a long, broken line, rising and falling like waves frozen in stone. It looks endless, but you know it has an end somewhere, far beyond what your eyes can reach, and that thought makes the structure feel even more powerful, because it proves that humans once tried to control the horizon itself. This was not simply a wall built to block enemies, it was a statement carved into the landscape, declaring that an empire could shape the world with willpower and stone. Yet standing here in the deep night, you can sense the truth that empires often forget. Nature is patient, and time is stronger than any ruler. The mountains remain, the stars remain, and the wall, despite its greatness, is still just a visitor in the endless life of the earth. As the wind whips through the tower, it creates a strange sound, half whistle and half sigh, and it feels like the wall is breathing, alive in a slow, ancient way. You imagine the soldiers who once stood here, their eyes scanning the darkness, their fingers numb from cold, their minds alert even when exhaustion begged them to sleep. They were not heroes in the way stories often describe. They were ordinary men trapped in extraordinary duty, living in isolation where the night stretched longer than the day. They would have listened to this same wind, stared at this same sky, and wondered if their families remembered them. The wall separated the empire from its enemies, but it also separated these men from warmth, from comfort, from the simple joy of being surrounded by life. In the night silence, loneliness becomes louder than any sound, and you can almost feel that loneliness lingering in the stones like a stain. You walk again, leaving the watchtower behind, and the path curves sharply along the ridge. Here the wall feels narrower, and on one side the mountains drop into darkness, so deep it looks like the earth has opened its mouth. A single wrong step could send you into the void, and that danger makes every movement deliberate. It is easy to forget that the wall was built not only to defend but also to challenge, to test the endurance of those who guarded it. The mountains themselves were part of the defense, and the wall used them like armor, clinging to steep cliffs where no army could move easily. At night, those cliffs become invisible threats, and the silence around them feels sharp, like the edge of a blade. You stop and look down, and the world below is hidden under darkness, but you can sense its vastness. Somewhere out there, beyond the mountains, were the lands the empire feared, the open spaces where horsemen could ride fast and vanish just as quickly. Those riders were not shadows. They were real people with their own lives and dreams, and the wall existed because two worlds could not trust each other. The Great Wall at night becomes a symbol not only of protection but of separation, a reminder that fear can build monuments just as easily as hope. Yet there is another side to this silence, a softer side that reveals itself if you stay long enough. As the hours pass, the night sky begins to change. The stars shift slowly, almost imperceptibly, and the darkness starts to thin near the horizon. It is not dawn yet, but the night has reached its turning point, and the wall seems to sense it. The wind calms slightly, the air feels less violent, and the silence becomes more peaceful, like a tired warrior finally lowering his weapon. In that moment, the Great Wall feels less like a fortress and more like a bridge between centuries, connecting the living with those who came before. You imagine all the footsteps that have walked this path, builders carrying stones, soldiers marching in armor, messengers running with urgent news, travelers whispering prayers, and now you, a quiet observer in the modern world, still drawn to the same ancient line. The wall does not care who you are. It accepts every visitor the same way, by surrounding them with its presence and forcing them to feel the weight of time. You reach a section where the stones are smoother, perhaps restored, and the contrast feels like a conversation between the past and the present. Restoration is an act of respect, but it is also a reminder that nothing lasts without care. The Great Wall has survived because people continue to remember it, to protect it, to keep it from disappearing into the mountains completely. And at night, when the world is quiet, that act of remembering feels sacred. The silence becomes a kind of language, and the wall speaks through it, telling you that history is not dead, only sleeping, waiting for someone to listen. As Part 3 ends, you stand still for a moment, letting the cold air fill your lungs, letting the last deep darkness surround you, and you realize that the Great Wall's night silence is not empty at all. It is full of echoes, full of unseen stories, full of the quiet strength of endurance, and as the horizon begins to lighten, you know the journey is far from over. Part 4 begins with a first fragile hint that the night is slowly surrendering, not with a sudden sunrise, but with a soft change in the air that only a quiet place like the Great Wall can reveal. The darkness is still heavy, yet the horizon carries a faint, cold glow, like a secret being whispered by the sky. The wall stretches ahead in a long curve, and in this dim half-light it appears even more mysterious, as if it is caught between two worlds, one of deep night silence and one of awakening morning. The stones beneath your feet feel damp with invisible moisture, and the wind that once roared through the ridges now moves more gently, brushing along the surface of the wall like a tired hand. This is the hour when the Great Wall feels most alive, not because people have returned, but because nature begins to stir again, and the silence changes its character. In the distance, a faint bird call breaks the quiet, sharp and brief, and then the stillness returns, as if the wall itself demanded respect for its final moments of darkness. You keep walking, and with each step you sense that the night's grip is loosening, yet the mood remains haunting, because the Great Wall holds onto its shadows as if it doesn't want to let them go. You pass another watchtower, its outline now clearer against the sky, and you notice details you couldn't see before: the jagged edges where bricks have fallen, the cracks that run like thin veins through the stone, and the worn corners shaped by centuries of weather. This tower once served as a heartbeat of defense, a place where eyes watched the borders and hands prepared signal fires, and even now, empty and silent, it carries the posture of vigilance. Stepping inside, you feel the chill deepen, as though the tower has preserved the night within its walls. The floor is rough and dusty, and the air smells faintly of old stone and cold earth. Looking through the openings, you see the mountains layered in darkness, but the edges of the ridges are beginning to glow, and the sight feels like a slow awakening of an ancient giant. It is easy to imagine a soldier standing here long ago, staring at the same horizon, waiting for dawn not only as a relief from cold, but as proof that he survived another night. The night silence of the Great Wall was never only about peace. It was also about endurance, about lasting through hours when fear and loneliness could become heavier than armor. Outside again, the wall continues along a steep climb, and as you rise higher, the wind becomes sharper, carrying the scent of pine and distant soil. The sky above is still filled with stars, but they look dimmer now, fading as the first light strengthens. There is something strangely emotional about this transition, because the night that felt endless is now quietly disappearing, and you realize how much the darkness shaped your thoughts. At night, the wall felt like a corridor of memory, a place where every shadow suggested a hidden story. Now, as the light grows, those shadows retreat, but the stories remain, locked into the stones. You walk along a section where the wall is broken and uneven, and the path becomes difficult, forcing you to slow down. Here, plants grow between the bricks, and thin roots cling stubbornly to the structure, proving again that nature never truly stops. The wall may have been built to resist invasion, but it could never resist time, and time works in quiet ways, like wind smoothing stone, like rain seeping into cracks, like frost breaking bricks apart during winter nights. The silence you hear is not only the silence of emptiness, it is the silence of slow transformation. You stop and place your hand on the stone, and it feels colder than you expected, almost as if it has stored the night within it. In that moment, you sense the walls age more strongly than ever, because the stone is not just a surface, it is a witness. It has felt the heat of countless summers, the bite of endless winters, and the weight of footsteps that are now only dust. Somewhere beyond this ridge, the wall stretches toward deserts and plains, and you imagine the vastness of the empire that once depended on it. Yet despite all its greatness, the wall could never fully guarantee safety, because no structure can stop human ambition forever. The wall's true power was not in being unbreakable, but in being a symbol, a message carved into the landscape that said, "We are here, and we will endure." That message still stands, especially in the quiet hours when the world is not distracted by noise. As dawn draws closer, the Great Wall's night silence becomes softer, less haunting, more reflective, like the calm after a long storm. The wind calms again, and the air feels less hostile, as if the mountains themselves are relaxing. Another bird call echoes, longer this time, followed by a faint flutter of wings, and suddenly you realize you are no longer alone in the same way. Life is returning, quietly and naturally, and the wall, which felt like a lonely guardian in the night, now feels like part of a living landscape. But even as the world wakes, the wall does not change its posture. It remains standing, steady and unmoving, as if it has watched the sunrise 1,000 times and knows that the day will pass just as the night did. You reach a high point where the wall offers a wide view, and the mountains stretch out like waves frozen in stone. The sky at the horizon is now pale gray, and the darkness has thinned enough that you can see the faint outline of distant towers, each one like a silent sentinel waiting for the light. You imagine the ancient system of communication that once connected these towers, how a single fire could carry a warning across miles, and how quickly that warning could awaken entire regions. In those days, the night silence could be shattered in seconds, turning into chaos, shouting, and movement. Yet tonight, there is no alarm, no fire, no threat, only the quiet passage of time. The Great Wall seems to reward this peace by revealing its beauty more clearly as the light grows. The stones begin to show their true colors, muted browns and grays, and the texture of the bricks becomes more visible, each one shaped by human hands that are now long gone. You feel a strange gratitude, not only for the wall's existence, but for the silence that allowed you to experience it in its purest form. Because in the day, the Great Wall is often treated like a monument, a tourist destination, a photograph. But in the night and early dawn, it becomes something deeper, a place where history feels close enough to touch. As Part 4 ends, the horizon brightens a little more, and the night silence begins to fade into morning quiet, yet the feeling remains inside you, a reminder that some places speak loudest when they speak through silence, and the Great Wall, standing between darkness and dawn, continues to guard not just land, but the memory of time itself. Part 5 begins at the edge of dawn, when the Great Wall of China seems to hover between two identities, one shaped by the night's haunting silence, and one slowly returning to the visible world of morning. The horizon is no longer black. It has turned into a pale ribbon of gray-blue light, and the mountains that were once only shadows now reveal their true forms, layered like sleeping giants across the distance. The air is still cold, but it feels cleaner, lighter, as if the night has washed the world and left it quiet and new. The wall stretches forward, and for the first time in hours you can see more clearly the details that darkness kept hidden, the uneven bricks, the rough repairs, the crumbling edges where time has bitten into stone. Yet even as visibility returns, the Great Wall does not lose its mystery. In fact, the early morning light makes it feel even more ancient because you can finally see the full weight of what humans built here, mile after mile of determination pressed into the landscape. The silence now is different from the night's silence. It is no longer tense or haunted, but calm and watchful, like the peaceful stillness after a long vigil. You continue walking, and your footsteps sound softer now, absorbed by the cold stones and a thin layer of dust. Somewhere far away, a bird sings again, and this time the sound carries longer, as if the mountains are ready to accept it. The Great Wall remains quiet, but it is no longer the deep, consuming quiet of darkness. It is the quiet of a place that has survived the hardest hours and is now simply waiting for the day to arrive. As you approach another watchtower, you notice how the first light touches its edges, turning sharp corners into glowing outlines. The tower looks less like a ghostly silhouette and more like a real structure again, and that shift feels almost emotional, as if the wall is waking up slowly. You step inside, and the cold air clings to the interior, but now you can see the rough stonework more clearly, the places where bricks were stacked with care, and the gaps where pieces have fallen away. Standing here, you imagine what dawn meant for the ancient guards who lived this life. Dawn was not simply the beginning of a new day. It was proof of survival. It meant warmth would return, visibility would improve, and the endless tension of night would ease. A guard who made it to dawn had won a small victory against fear, cold, and exhaustion. The wall was their duty, but dawn was their reward. Leaving the tower, you climb higher along the ridge, and the sky brightens further, washing the landscape in soft light. The stars vanish one by one, fading like memories, and the moon becomes pale and distant, no longer ruling the mountains. The Great Wall, however, remains unchanged in its presence, as if it belongs equally to night and day. You realize that this structure has always existed in transitions, between empires and enemies, between peace and war, between human ambition and nature's patience. It was built as a line of control, but it became a line of history, and now it stands as a line of reflection, forcing anyone who walks it to think about time. The morning light reveals small signs of life around the wall, thin grasses moving in the breeze, tiny insects waking among the stones, and faint mist lingering in the valleys below. That mist looks like a soft ocean, filling the lowlands and making the wall appear like a ship sailing above clouds. The sight is breathtaking, and it reminds you that the Great Wall is not only a monument of struggle, but also a place of beauty. At night, it felt heavy and haunted, but in dawn, it feels almost poetic, as if the wall is showing a gentler face to those who stayed long enough to witness it. You stop and look along the path behind you, and you can see the towers spaced across the ridges like silent beads on a thread. Each tower once held fire, movement, and human voices, but now they hold only wind and memory. Yet that memory is not sad. It is powerful. It is proof that people once lived with a purpose strong enough to shape mountains, and even if that purpose was born from fear, it created something that outlived fear itself. As the light grows stronger, you notice the contrast between restored sections and broken sections more clearly. Some parts of the wall look almost new, with clean stones and stable steps, while other parts are cracked and collapsing, leaning into the mountains as if surrendering. This contrast feels like a conversation between two truths, one that says history must be preserved, and another that says history must be allowed to fade naturally. The Great Wall exists in both truths at once. It is protected and repaired, but it is also slowly returning to the earth, because nothing made by humans can remain unchanged forever. The morning silence becomes filled with soft movement, wind through grass, distant birds, the faint sound of something shifting in the stones. These sounds are gentle, but they remind you that the world is waking up, and soon the Great Wall will belong to the day again, with its noise and footsteps and voices. Yet you hold on to the feeling of the night because you know how different the wall becomes when it is alone. In the darkness, it felt like a living memory, like a sleeping guardian. In dawn, it feels like an ancient teacher, revealing lessons quietly through its endurance. You begin to understand that the Great Wall's greatest story is not only about battles and emperors, but about time itself, how time changes everything, yet some things remain strong enough to stand through it. The wall has watched countless dawns rise over these mountains, and each dawn has carried new hopes, new fears, new lives. The people who built it are gone, the dynasties that ordered it are gone, and the wars it prepared for have changed into distant history, but the wall remains, still tracing the spine of the land. As Part 5 comes to an end, the sun is close to appearing, and the Great Wall is no longer hidden in darkness. Yet the night silence still clings to it like a shadow that refuses to disappear completely. Even in daylight, the wall will remember the quiet hours, the lonely watchtowers, and the endless wind that spoke through the stones. And as you stand there, surrounded by cold morning air and growing light, you realize that the Great Wall is not just something you see, it is something you feel, especially when you experience it in the rare moments between night and day, when silence and history walk side by side. Part 6 begins as the sun finally approaches the horizon, not bursting into the sky all at once, but rising slowly like a careful promise, painting the edge of the mountains with faint gold. The Great Wall, which only hours ago felt like a shadowed mystery, now stands clearer with every passing minute, and yet its silence remains, as if it has kept the night inside its stones. The cold air still clings to the ridges, and the wind moves gently, no longer fierce, but steady, like a quiet companion that has walked beside the wall for centuries. The dawn light reveals textures that darkness hid: rough brickwork, chipped corners, small plants growing stubbornly between cracks, and the uneven lines that show where different eras repaired and reshaped the structure. The wall looks less like a single creation and more like a living timeline, a long story written in stone by many hands across many generations. You walk forward, and the morning begins to fill the valleys below with soft color, while thin mist rises like breath from the sleeping earth. In that mist, the distant towers look like islands floating in a pale sea, and the wall itself feels like a path between worlds, connecting the dreamlike silence of night to the waking reality of day. Yet even as the landscape brightens, the mood remains strangely quiet, because there are still no crowds, no voices, no footsteps except your own. It is as if the Great Wall has granted you one last private moment before it becomes part of the busy world again. The silence now carries a different meaning. At night, it felt tense and haunted, filled with unseen fears and imagined footsteps. In the early morning, it feels reflective, like a calm mind after surviving a storm. You can hear birds more clearly now, their calls echoing across the ridges, and each sound feels like a gentle reminder that life continues beyond stone and history. The wall does not answer those calls, but it seems to accept them, standing quietly as the mountains wake around it. You reach another watchtower, and this one is partly restored, its doorway stable, its walls strong enough to suggest what it once looked like in its prime. Stepping inside, you notice how the light enters differently now, spilling across the floor and revealing dust patterns and small stones scattered like forgotten coins. The tower no longer feels like a dark chamber of secrets. It feels like a room of memories exposed by morning. Looking through the openings, you can see farther than before, and you realize why this place mattered so much. From here, the world is wide, and the horizon feels close enough to touch. This was the advantage of the wall, not only its strength, but its vision. The men who guarded it could see danger long before it arrived, and in that early warning lived the Empire's survival. But that vision came with isolation. Standing here now, with sunlight slowly spreading, you can imagine the loneliness of a guard watching dawn break after a sleepless night, knowing that the day would bring more waiting, more scanning of the distance, more time spent far from home. The Great Wall demanded constant attention, and attention can be exhausting when the world is silent and empty. As you leave the tower and continue along the wall, the sun finally lifts above the mountains, and the first true warmth touches your skin. It is a small warmth, gentle, but it feels powerful after hours of cold. The stones begin to change color under the sunlight, shifting from gray-blue to warmer shades, and the wall looks almost softer, less harsh, as if it is revealing a kinder side. Yet the structure remains massive, and the sight of it still carries the weight of human ambition. It is impossible not to think about the labor that built it, the countless hands that carried bricks, cut stone, and mixed mortar, often under brutal conditions. Many never saw their homes again, and the wall became their final monument. In the morning light, this sacrifice feels clearer, because the wall's physical reality is undeniable. It is not a myth or a dream. It is real, and it exists because people gave everything to make it stand. The Great Wall's silence, even in daylight, feels like respect for those lives. As the sun rises higher, the valleys below begin to show more detail. You can see winding paths, patches of forest, and distant shapes that might be small villages. The world that was hidden at night is now visible, and that visibility changes your emotions. The fear and mystery fade, replaced by awe and understanding. You realize that the Great Wall was never meant to be experienced only in darkness. It belongs to the landscape in every hour, and its meaning changes with the light. At night, it is a guardian of shadows, a place where imagination and history blend. At dawn, it is a witness, a teacher, revealing how time moves and how endurance is built. In full day, it becomes a symbol recognized by the world, a monument people travel across oceans to see. But the rarest experience is this moment, when the wall is still quiet, still empty, still holding the last breath of night while welcoming the first breath of morning. You pause and look back one last time at the stretch of wall behind you. The towers stand in a line across the ridges, and you imagine the ancient signal fires again, how they would have burned against the dark sky, carrying warnings from one mountain to another. That system is silent now, but the wall still carries the memory of urgency, the memory of nights when a single flame meant armies moving, gates closing, lives changing. The morning sun makes that memory feel distant, yet it does not erase it. The wall holds all its past at once, and that is what makes it feel timeless. As Part 6 ends, the day is fully arriving, and the Great Wall begins to look like the famous monument people know from photographs and stories. But you know the truth that most visitors never feel, that beneath the sunlight, the wall still contains the night's silence, the cold wind, the lonely watchtowers, and the deep quiet where history speaks without words. The Great Wall does not forget the night, and neither do you, because once you have walked its stones in darkness and watched the dawn rise over its endless spine, you understand that its greatest power is not only in its size, but in the silent emotions it awakens: fear, awe, respect, and the unforgettable feeling of standing face to face with time itself. Part 7 begins with the Great Wall fully bathed in morning light, yet the atmosphere still feels unusually quiet, as if the world has not completely awakened and the wall is holding onto the last traces of the night's spell. The sun now sits above the ridgeline, casting long shadows that stretch across the stone pathway like dark ribbons, and the watchtowers no longer appear as ghostly silhouettes but as solid, weathered guardians standing proudly against the brightening sky. Even in daylight, the Great Wall does not feel ordinary. It carries a strange emotional weight, because you know what it felt like only hours earlier when darkness wrapped around it, when every sound seemed suspicious and every shadow looked alive. That memory of night remains inside you, and it changes the way you see the wall now. The bricks that seemed cold and haunted in the dark now look warm and ancient, their rough surfaces glowing softly as if the sun is revealing hidden details carved by time. You walk forward, and the path becomes easier to follow in the light, but it still demands respect. The stones are uneven, worn down by centuries of weather and footsteps, and the wall rises and falls with the mountains in a way that feels almost impossible, like a human dream forced into the shape of nature. The morning air is crisp, and each breath feels sharp but refreshing, filling your lungs with the scent of pine and dry earth. Far below, the valleys begin to show more movement, faint signs of life, distant smoke rising from unseen homes, tiny paths that twist between hills. Yet up here, the wall remains separate, still above the world, still watching. That separation is part of its identity. It was built to stand apart, to be a line that divided and protected, and even now, when its purpose has changed, it still carries the feeling of distance. As you approach another watchtower, you notice how the sunlight reveals the marks of time more clearly than the night ever could. The tower's walls are cracked in places, and some bricks are darker than others, suggesting repairs made by different hands in different eras. The Great Wall is not one single creation frozen in time. It is a layered structure, a living record of history that has been rebuilt, reinforced, and reshaped again and again. Inside the watchtower, the light spills across the floor, revealing dust, small stones, and faint scratches in the walls. You imagine the hands that once touched these same surfaces, soldiers leaning against the stone, messengers resting for a breath before running onward, guards pressing their faces close to openings to scan the horizon. In the night, those men would have been tense and alert, their eyes trained on darkness. In the morning, they would have felt relief, because daylight brought clarity. It brought the ability to see threats from far away. It brought warmth, and with warmth came a sense of survival. Yet, even in daylight, danger could still exist. The wall was never truly safe, and that constant uncertainty shaped the lives of those who lived here. Leaving the tower behind, you continue along the ridge, and the wall begins to curve sharply, leading toward a higher peak. The climb is steep, and as you move upward, your legs feel the effort, reminding you that the wall was built not only as a barrier, but as a challenge. It forced anyone traveling along it, friend or enemy, to face the harshness of the terrain. It used the mountains as allies, turning cliffs and ridges into natural defenses. Now, in daylight, you can see how strategic it was, how carefully it was placed to dominate the landscape. From this height, the world looks wide and open, and you understand why the wall inspired both pride and fear. Pride for those who built it, fear for those who faced it. The sunlight grows stronger and the shadows shorten, but the wall's presence remains intense. It feels as though it has absorbed so much human emotion over the centuries that it cannot be reduced to stone alone. It has held the anxiety of border guards, the ambition of emperors, the exhaustion of laborers, and the grief of families who never saw their loved ones return. Those emotions do not disappear simply because the sun rises. They remain in the structure like invisible threads woven into every brick. You stop at a section where the wall is broken and the path dips slightly, forcing you to step carefully. Here, nature has pushed through, with small plants and grasses growing between the stones. The contrast between human construction and natural growth feels like a quiet lesson. The wall was built to resist, to stand firm, to control space, but nature does not fight with force. Nature wins through patience. It grows slowly, quietly, and endlessly, and over time it reshapes everything. The Great Wall has endured because it is strong, but it has also changed because nothing can remain untouched by time. The morning light makes this truth impossible to ignore because you can see both strength and decay side by side. You continue walking, and the wall begins to descend toward a lower ridge. The view opens up, and you can see a long stretch ahead, dotted with towers like stepping stones across the mountains. The scene is breathtaking, and you realize that the Great Wall is not only a monument of war and defense, it is also a monument of human imagination. Someone once looked at these endless mountains and believed they could build a line across them, a line that would shape the destiny of an empire. That belief was bold, almost impossible, and yet it became real. In daylight, the wall feels like proof of what humans can do when driven by purpose, even if that purpose is complicated, even if it is born from fear and conflict. The morning continues to brighten, and you sense that soon the quiet will be broken by the sounds of modern life. Tourists arriving, voices rising, footsteps echoing, cameras clicking. But for now, the wall still belongs to you and the wind and the rising sun. It feels like a rare gift, this moment of peace before the world returns. You pause again and look back toward the path you traveled in the night, remembering how different it felt then, how the silence seemed endless and the shadows seemed alive. Now, under the sun, the wall looks calmer, but the night's memory remains inside it, like a hidden layer beneath the light. As Part 7 ends, you realize that the Great Wall's true magic is not only in its size or history, but in the way it changes with time of day. It can be haunted in darkness, poetic at dawn, and majestic in sunlight, yet always it remains the same ancient guardian, standing quietly above the world, carrying the night's silence and the day's light together in its endless, timeless spine. Part 8 begins with the day growing stronger, yet the Great Wall still feels untouched by ordinary time, as if it exists in a separate rhythm where centuries move slowly and every sunrise is simply another breath in an endless cycle. The sunlight now spreads fully across the ridges, warming the stones and softening the sharp edges of shadow, but the quiet remains in a way that feels almost unnatural for such a famous place. Perhaps it is because you are still walking in the early hours before the crowds arrive, before the modern world brings its noise and distraction. The wall stretches ahead like a road built for giants, winding over mountains with a confidence that seems impossible, and the watchtowers stand at intervals like silent witnesses that refuse to blink. You walk forward, and the stones beneath your feet feel different now, less cold, carrying the first gentle warmth of the sun, and that warmth creates a strange contrast with the memories of a night. Only hours ago, the wall felt haunted, tense, and filled with unseen fears. Now it feels calm, almost welcoming, yet the night's silence still lingers in your mind like a distant echo, shaping your thoughts even as the world brightens. The Great Wall is not just a structure you see, it is an experience that changes your emotions, shifting them like the changing light across the mountains. As you continue, the path leads toward a wider section where the wall opens up and the view becomes breathtaking in a new way. The valleys below are no longer hidden under darkness or mist. They are clear, revealing forests, winding trails, and far-off shapes of villages that seem tiny compared to the endless stone line above them. The wall feels like a boundary between two lives: the life below where people wake, work, and return home, and the life above where the wall stands alone, exposed to wind and weather, watching the world in silence. That loneliness is part of its character, and even in daylight it remains. You reach a watchtower that is taller than most, its steps worn but stable, and you climb carefully until you stand at the highest opening. From here, the world looks endless. The wall stretches in both directions, rising and falling like waves frozen in stone, and for a moment you forget the modern age completely. It is easy to imagine this place in ancient times, when this tower would have been alive with duty. Guards would have watched the horizon with sharp eyes, scanning for movement, for dust clouds, for the faint glimmer of metal in the distance. They would have lived in a constant balance between boredom and fear, because most of their days were quiet, yet they knew that one sudden moment could change everything. In the early morning, they would have welcomed the light because it brought visibility and warmth, but it also brought responsibility because daylight was when scouts might appear, when messages might arrive, when orders might be given. The Great Wall was not only a defense, it was a living system, and every watchtower was a nerve in that system, connected by signals, fires, and human endurance. Standing here now, you can almost feel the tension that once filled this space, like an invisible pressure trapped in the stone. You step back down and continue along the wall, and as the sun climbs higher, the wind shifts, becoming warmer but still persistent. It carries the scent of dry grass and stone dust, and the sound of it moving across the wall is like a low, steady whisper. That whisper reminds you of the night again, when the wind felt like a voice speaking in the darkness. In daylight, it feels less frightening, but it still feels meaningful, as if the wall and the wind have shared a conversation for centuries that humans will never fully understand. You pass a section where the wall is cracked and partially collapsed, and the contrast between strength and decay becomes more striking in the sunlight. Some bricks are missing, leaving jagged gaps like broken teeth, and small plants grow from the edges, their roots gripping the structure as if trying to pull it back into the mountain. This sight is not sad. It is honest. It shows that even the greatest human achievements are not immune to time. The wall endures, but it also changes, and that change is part of its story. The restored sections represent modern respect, the desire to preserve history, while the broken sections represent nature's slow reclaiming, the reminder that everything returns to the earth eventually. Walking through both, you feel like you are moving through two realities at once, one where the wall is eternal, and one where it is fragile. The sunlight grows brighter, and the stones begin to reflect a warmer tone, and you notice how different the wall looks depending on the angle of light. In some places it glows softly, almost golden, and in others it remains dark and rough, holding on to shadows in its cracks. This shifting appearance feels symbolic because the Great Wall itself has many faces. It is a symbol of strength, but also of fear. It is a monument of unity, but also of division. It is a masterpiece of engineering, but also a reminder of human suffering. It was built to keep people out, but now it invites people in. And perhaps that is why the wall feels so powerful, because it holds contradictions without breaking. As you walk, you begin to hear faint sounds in the distance, maybe the first signs of people approaching, maybe voices carried by the wind, maybe the modern world slowly climbing toward the ancient stones. The thought feels strange, because for so long the wall has been yours alone, wrapped in silence and early light. Soon, that quiet will disappear, replaced by the noise of footsteps and conversation, and the wall will become a public place again. But even when that happens, you know the night silence will still exist here, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the next time darkness falls and the world becomes quiet. You stop at a point where the wall curves sharply around a mountain, and you look back along the path you traveled through the night and dawn. The journey feels like a dream now, as if you walked through a story rather than a real place. Yet the stones beneath your feet prove it was real, and the sun above proves that time has moved forward. The Great Wall has seen this same transition countless times, from night to dawn today, and it will see it countless times again. As Part 8 ends, you realize that the Great Wall's greatest secret is not hidden in legends or myths, but in its ability to make time feel different. It can make a single night feel like a century, and a single sunrise feel like a revelation. And even as the day fully claims the mountains, the memory of the wall's night silence remains, not as fear, but as a quiet understanding that some places are more than stone. They are living echoes of human history, forever standing between darkness and light. Part 9 begins when the Great Wall is no longer wrapped in the gentle quiet of early morning, but is stepping closer to the pulse of the day, even though it still feels far removed from ordinary life. The sunlight is stronger now, bright enough to sharpen every detail, and the stones seem to carry a warm glow that contrasts with the cold memories of a night. Yet the wall does not lose its solemn character. Even under a clear sky, it holds the weight of centuries in its posture, standing firm along the ridges as if it is still guarding something invisible. The wind continues to travel along its path, sometimes soft, sometimes sudden, and it moves like a messenger that never tires, carrying whispers from tower to tower. You walk forward and notice how the wall feels different now that the world is fully visible. At night, the darkness made everything mysterious, and your mind filled the silence with imagined stories. In daylight, the imagination is still there, but it is guided by what you can see. Cracks in the bricks, repairs made by different hands, the shape of towers positioned with strategic precision. The wall's history becomes clearer, and with clarity comes a deeper understanding of how real and demanding this place once was. The Great Wall was not built for beauty, even though it has become beautiful. It was built for survival, and survival is always serious. As you move along a steep stretch, the path rises sharply, and you feel the effort in your legs, reminding you again that this monument is not gentle. It was built on harsh terrain because harsh terrain was part of its strength. The mountains themselves became allies, and the wall used their steep slopes and sharp ridges to make invasion difficult. Standing here now, with the sun above and the valleys below fully visible, you can see how carefully this line was chosen. It dominates the landscape, watching every possible route, controlling the high ground, turning nature into a fortress. You pass a watchtower where the stones are darker, perhaps stained by time or weather, and the tower looks older than the others, more wounded, as if it has endured more storms. You step inside, and the cool air within feels like a reminder of the night that still lives in the wall's shadowed spaces. The tower is quiet, but not empty. It feels filled with invisible presence, not supernatural in a dramatic way, but historical in a deep, human way. You imagine the sound of boots on stone, the scrape of armor, the murmur of tired voices. You imagine a guard leaning against the wall, staring out into the distance, thinking about home, thinking about how far away comfort is. The wall demanded not only strength from the empire, but strength from individuals, men who stood here in all seasons, enduring cold winters, scorching summers, and endless nights where the wind seemed to speak. The Great Wall's silence, even now, feels like respect for their endurance. Outside again, you continue walking, and the wall curves around another ridge. The view opens up, and you see long stretches of stone line disappearing into the distance. The sight is overwhelming because it reminds you how much effort it took to create something so vast. This was not the work of one ruler or one generation. It was the work of many eras, each adding to the structure, each believing that this wall was necessary. And perhaps that is what makes the Great Wall feel so powerful. It is a monument not only of stone, but of repeated human decision, a decision to build, to defend, to endure. As the day grows brighter, you begin to hear faint signs of modern life again. Somewhere far off, you catch the echo of voices, not loud yet, but present. The sound feels strange after so many hours of solitude, because the wall has felt like a private world, a silent kingdom of stone and wind. You realize that the Great Wall exists in two realities at once. It is a historical frontier, once filled with danger and duty, and it is also a modern symbol, visited by people who come to admire it, to photograph it, to feel its greatness for a brief moment. The contrast is sharp. In ancient times, walking here meant responsibility, fear, and survival. Today, walking here often means wonder, curiosity, and peace. Yet both experiences are connected, because the wall is the same. The stones do not change their memory simply because the purpose has changed. The wall still remembers the nights when signal fires lit the ridges, when smoke rose into the sky, when warnings traveled faster than any horse could run. It remembers the tension of footsteps in the dark, the quiet conversations of men who tried to stay awake, the loneliness of standing guard while the empire slept. Even in daylight, you can sense that memory if you listen closely enough, because the wall carries it like a hidden heartbeat beneath its surface. You stop at a point where the wall is high and the landscape spreads wide. The valleys below are now fully alive with color, greens and browns and distant blue shadows, and the sky above is bright and endless. The sun makes the wall look majestic, almost triumphant, and you understand why it became a symbol recognized across the world. But you also understand something deeper. The Great Wall is not truly triumphant. It is not a celebration of victory. It is a reminder of the cost of fear and ambition, of the sacrifices made to create security, of the endless struggle to control borders and protect power. The wall is beautiful, but it was born from necessity, and necessity often demands pain. That truth makes the wall's quiet presence feel even more meaningful. You continue walking, and the sound of your footsteps blends with the wind, and for a moment you feel like you are part of the wall's long story, another traveler adding a brief chapter to its endless timeline. The modern world may soon arrive with noise and movement, but right now, the wall still feels calm, still holding onto the last threads of solitude. As Part 9 ends, you look ahead and see the line of towers continuing into the distance, and you realize that the Great Wall's night silence is not limited to the hours of darkness. It lives within the wall itself, hidden beneath the sunlight, waiting in the cracks and towers, ready to return when the sun falls again. And that is the wall's true magic. It carries both the shadow and the light, both the fear and the beauty, both the past and the present, standing endlessly between them like a silent guardian of time. Part 10 begins with the Great Wall standing fully awake beneath the sun, yet still carrying the invisible imprint of the night that shaped our journey from the very first step. The day has matured now. The sky is bright and open, and the mountains no longer hide behind shadow or mist. Everything is clear. Every ridge, every valley, every worn brick and broken edge, yet the wall does not feel any less mysterious. In some ways, the daylight makes it even more powerful because now you can truly see the scale of what human hands created, a stone spine stretching across the earth with a determination that feels almost impossible. The wind moves steadily along the wall as it always has, brushing across the watchtowers, slipping through cracks, carrying dust and distant sounds, and even though the world is brighter, that wind still feels like the wall's oldest companion, the same force that whispered through the darkness when the night was at its deepest. You continue walking and notice that the path is beginning to feel less isolated. Somewhere ahead, faint voices rise and fall, carried by the breeze, and you know that the modern world is approaching. The Great Wall is about to shift once more, from a private realm of silence and reflection into a place where people gather, where footsteps multiply, where history becomes something shared rather than something quietly felt. Yet before that moment fully arrives, you pause and let yourself absorb what the wall has shown you. You remember how the darkness transformed it into a haunted corridor of memory, where every shadow seemed alive and every sound felt like a warning. You remember the watchtowers that stood like lonely guardians against the night sky, the cold air trapped inside their stone walls, and the way your own heartbeat became part of the silence. You remember the tension of imagining ancient guards scanning the horizon, waiting for signal fires, fearing the sudden appearance of enemies hidden by the dark. Those memories feel distant now under the sun, but they are not gone. They remain like a layer beneath the daylight, a reminder that the wall has lived through countless nights like the one we traveled, and that its true story is not written only in dates and dynasties, but in human endurance. The wall stones are not simply bricks stacked together. They are the result of sacrifice, labor, and lives spent under harsh conditions. In the bright light, the wall's beauty is undeniable, but its beauty is not soft or effortless. It is the beauty of something that survived, something that refused to vanish even as empires changed and generations disappeared. You walk toward a section where the wall is both restored and broken, a place where smooth, repaired stones meet jagged ruins. This meeting point feels symbolic, like the wall itself is showing you its two identities at once: the preserved monument that the modern world protects, and the ancient structure that time continues to claim. The restored stones feel solid and steady under your feet, while the broken sections feel fragile, forcing you to step carefully. In that contrast, you sense the truth that history is never one thing. It is always a mixture of what is remembered and what is forgotten, what is saved and what is lost. The Great Wall stands because people refuse to let it disappear completely, but it also stands as a reminder that nothing can remain untouched by time. As you move forward, you reach a high point where the wall offers one last breathtaking view. The mountains spread out endlessly, and the wall runs across them like a line drawn by a giant hand. You can see watchtowers in the distance, each one smaller and fainter, disappearing into the horizon until the wall becomes a suggestion rather than a certainty. This view makes you understand why the wall became a legend. It is not only its length or its strength, but its ability to make the human mind feel small and amazed at the same time. Standing here, you realize that the Great Wall's greatest power is not physical. Its greatest power is emotional. It forces you to confront the scale of history, the patience of nature, and the fragile, determined spirit of humanity. The wall was built to separate worlds, to protect an empire from what lay beyond, but now it connects worlds instead. It connects the past to the present, the ancient to the modern, the imagination to reality. It invites people from everywhere to walk its stones, to touch its bricks, to feel its presence. And yet, even with that invitation, the wall remains distant in its own way because no matter how many people visit, no one can fully step into the lives of those who built it and guarded it. Their world is gone, but their echoes remain. The wind still travels the same ridges they watched, the sun still rises over the same mountains they endured, and the night still falls with the same quiet darkness that once tested their courage. The modern voices you hear now grow closer, and soon the wall will be filled with movement, laughter, and conversation. But you carry something different now, because you have seen the wall in its rarest form, alone, silent, and wrapped in the night's deep stillness. You have walked through the hours when the Great Wall feels like a living memory, when it becomes more than a monument and turns into a presence. You understand now that the wall's silence is not simply the absence of sound. It is a language of endurance, a quiet testimony to everything it has witnessed. It is the sound of time moving slowly, of stone resisting change, of history refusing to disappear. As you take your final steps in this part of the journey, you look back once more at the stretch of wall behind you, and you feel a strange gratitude, not only for the beauty of the structure, but for the silence that allowed you to feel it deeply. The Great Wall has stood through storms, wars, dynasties, and endless seasons, and it will continue to stand long after this day passes, long after these footsteps fade. The night will return, the wind will whisper again, and the wall will once again become the quiet guardian of the mountains. And as Part 10 ends, the series leaves you with one lasting truth. The Great Wall of China is not only a monument you visit, but a timeless experience that changes with every hour, and in its night silence, it reveals its deepest soul, an ancient presence that speaks most clearly when the world is quiet enough to listen. Part 10 begins with the Great Wall standing fully awake beneath the sun, yet still carrying the invisible imprint of the night that shaped our journey from the very first step. The day has matured now, the sky is bright and open, and the mountains no longer hide behind shadow or mist. Everything is clear, every ridge, every valley, every worn brick and broken edge, yet the wall does not feel any less mysterious. In some ways, the daylight makes it even more powerful because now you can truly see the scale of what human hands created, a stone spine stretching across the earth with a determination that feels almost impossible. The wind moves steadily along the wall as it always has, brushing across the watchtowers, slipping through cracks, carrying dust and distant sounds, and even though the world is brighter, that wind still feels like the wall's oldest companion, the same force that whispered through the darkness when the night was at its deepest. You continue walking and notice that the path is beginning to feel less isolated. Somewhere ahead, faint voices rise and fall, carried by the breeze, and you know that the modern world is approaching. The Great Wall is about to shift once more, from a private realm of silence and reflection into a place where people gather, where footsteps multiply, where history becomes something shared rather than something quietly felt. Yet before that moment fully arrives, you pause and let yourself absorb what the wall has shown you. You remember how the darkness transformed it into a haunted corridor of memory, where every shadow seemed alive and every sound felt like a warning. You remember the watchtowers that stood like lonely guardians against the night sky, the cold air trapped inside their stone walls, and the way your own heartbeat became part of the silence. You remember the tension of imagining ancient guards scanning the horizon, waiting for signal fires, fearing the sudden appearance of enemies hidden by the dark. Those memories feel distant now under the sun, but they are not gone. They remain like a layer beneath the daylight, a reminder that the wall has lived through countless nights like the one we traveled, and that its true story is not written only in dates and dynasties, but in human endurance. The wall stones are not simply bricks stacked together. They are the result of sacrifice, labor, and lives spent under harsh conditions. In the bright light, the wall's beauty is undeniable, but its beauty is not soft or effortless. It is the beauty of something that survived, something that refused to vanish even as empires changed and generations disappeared. You walk toward a section where the wall is both restored and broken, a place where smooth, repaired stones meet jagged ruins. This meeting point feels symbolic, like the wall itself is showing you its two identities at once: the preserved monument that the modern world protects, and the ancient structure that time continues to claim. The restored stones feel solid and steady under your feet, while the broken sections feel fragile, forcing you to step carefully. In that contrast, you sense the truth that history is never one thing. It is always a mixture of what is remembered and what is forgotten, what is saved and what is lost. The Great Wall stands because people refuse to let it disappear completely, but it also stands as a reminder that nothing can remain untouched by time. As you move forward, you reach a high point where the wall offers one last breathtaking view. The mountains spread out endlessly, and the wall runs across them like a line drawn by a giant hand. You can see watchtowers in the distance, each one smaller and fainter, disappearing into the horizon until the wall becomes a suggestion rather than a certainty. This view makes you understand why the wall became a legend. It is not only its length or its strength, but its ability to make the human mind feel small and amazed at the same time. Standing here, you realize that the Great Wall's greatest power is not physical. Its greatest power is emotional. It forces you to confront the scale of history, the patience of nature, and the fragile, determined spirit of humanity. The wall was built to separate worlds, to protect an empire from what lay beyond, but now it connects worlds instead. It connects the past to the present, the ancient to the modern, the imagination to reality. It invites people from everywhere to walk its stones, to touch its bricks, to feel its presence. And yet, even with that invitation, the wall remains distant in its own way because no matter how many people visit, no one can fully step into the lives of those who built it and guarded it. Their world is gone, but their echoes remain. The wind still travels the same ridges they watched, the sun still rises over the same mountains they endured, and the night still falls with the same quiet darkness that once tested their courage. The modern voices you hear now grow closer, and soon the wall will be filled with movement, laughter, and conversation. But you carry something different now, because you have seen the wall in its rarest form, alone, silent, and wrapped in the night's deep stillness. You have walked through the hours when the Great Wall feels like a living memory, when it becomes more than a monument and turns into a presence. You understand now that the wall's silence is not simply the absence of sound. It is a language of endurance, a quiet testimony to everything it has witnessed. It is the sound of time moving slowly, of stone resisting change, of history refusing to disappear. As you take your final steps in this part of the journey, you look back once more at the stretch of wall behind you, and you feel a strange gratitude, not only for the beauty of the structure, but for the silence that allowed you to feel it deeply. The Great Wall has stood through storms, wars, dynasties, and endless seasons, and it will continue to stand long after this day passes, long after these footsteps fade. The night will return, the wind will whisper again, and the wall will once again become the quiet guardian of the mountains. And as Part 10 ends, the series leaves you with one lasting truth. The Great Wall of China is not only a monument you visit, but a timeless experience that changes with every hour, and in its night silence, it reveals its deepest soul, an ancient presence that speaks most clearly when the world is quiet enough to listen. Part 12 begins with the Great Wall stretching forward like a path that refuses to end, a stone ribbon laid across the mountains with the stubborn patience of something that has outlived every voice that once commanded it. The daylight is still strong, but it has softened slightly, as if the sun itself is beginning to grow tired of its climb, and the air carries a hint of change. You can feel it in the wind, a cooler breath slipping through the ridges, touching the surface of the wall and reminding you that no matter how bright the day becomes, the night is always waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. The wall is alive with small movements now, distant travelers, occasional echoes of conversation, the faint rhythm of footsteps, but those sounds never dominate. They rise briefly and then dissolve into the vastness, swallowed by the mountains and the endless sky. That is the strange power of this place. It allows human presence, but it never belongs to humans alone. The Great Wall belongs to time, and time has no interest in noise. You continue along a section where the stones feel older, rougher, less restored, and the surface beneath your feet becomes uneven again. Each step demands attention, and that attention pulls you deeper into the wall's reality. You begin to imagine how exhausting it must have been for the soldiers who lived here, not for a few hours like a visitor, but for seasons, for years, perhaps for entire lifetimes. They would have walked these same ridges under the burning sun, under freezing winds, under rain that turned stone slick and dangerous. They would have carried supplies, weapons, messages, and fear, always fear, because the wall was built from fear as much as from stone. It was a response to the unknown, a defense against what lay beyond, and even when no enemy appeared, the possibility of an enemy was enough to keep men awake at night. The night silence we have followed throughout the series was not only peaceful, it was also heavy, the silence of men listening for danger, the silence of breath held in suspense. Now, under the fading warmth of afternoon, you can still sense that tension trapped inside the stones like a memory that refuses to fade. The wall curves ahead and climbs again, and when you reach a higher point, you pause to look down into the valleys. The landscape feels endless, and for a moment you understand why the wall could never fully guarantee safety. Nature itself is too vast, too unpredictable, too open. Even the longest barrier cannot control every path, every hidden trail, every shifting movement of people and animals. The Great Wall was not a perfect shield, but it was a powerful statement. It declared that an empire was willing to spend unimaginable effort to protect itself, that it believed its borders mattered enough to carve a line into the earth. Standing here, you can feel the weight of that statement, and you can also feel the cost. The wall is a monument not only to strength, but to human struggle, because every brick represents labor, and every tower represents time stolen from lives that could have been lived elsewhere. As you continue walking, you find a quiet stretch where the wall seems empty again, where the voices of other visitors vanish, leaving only wind and the occasional call of a bird circling overhead. The silence returns in a softer form, not the deep night silence, but a daytime silence that feels like a pause between worlds. In this pause, the wall feels closer to what it was long ago. You imagine a lone guard standing at the edge of a watchtower, eyes narrowed against the sun, scanning the horizon for movement. You imagine the sound of armor shifting, the scrape of boots on stone, the smell of dust and sweat and smoke from distant fires. You imagine how the guard would have felt the same wind you feel now, how he would have watched the same mountains, and how he might have wondered if anyone would remember him when his duty ended. The Great Wall remembers him, even if the world does not, because the wall is made from the lives of men like him. That is why it feels so alive in silence. It holds more than stone. It holds the echoes of forgotten people. The afternoon continues to drift toward evening, and the light changes subtly, turning warmer, casting longer shadows along the wall's surface. The watchtowers begin to look more dramatic again, their outlines sharp against the sky, and the ridges ahead appear darker, as if the mountains are preparing to reclaim the wall in shadow. This is the moment when the wall begins to transform again, not fully into night, but into the border between day and night, the time when the world becomes quieter and the air grows colder. You realize that this transition might be the most haunting time of all, because it carries both clarity and mystery. The wall is still visible, still detailed, but the shadows are returning, and with them comes the feeling that something unseen is moving closer. The Great Wall at dusk feels like a doorway, a threshold into the silence we have been chasing since the beginning. You stop near another watchtower and look inside. The interior is darker now, and the coolness is stronger. The stone seems to drink the fading light, holding onto it only briefly before letting it go. You stand there for a moment and listen, and the quiet feels thicker, like the world is slowly lowering its voice. Outside, the wind continues, but it sounds different now, deeper, more distant, as if it is speaking in an older language. You step back out and see the wall ahead, and you understand that the night silence is not something separate from the wall. It is part of it, like a second skin. The wall was born in a world where night meant danger, and so it carries the night within its identity. Even when crowds come and go, even when daylight makes everything seem ordinary, the wall never forgets what it was built for. It never forgets the fear of darkness, the duty of watchfulness, the loneliness of guarding a border that stretched farther than the eye could see. As Part 12 ends, the sun begins to lower toward the mountains, and the Great Wall prepares to return to its most powerful form. The shadows grow longer, the air grows colder, and the first hints of true night begin to gather along the ridges. You keep walking forward, knowing that soon the voices will fade again, the world will fall silent, and the Great Wall will once more become the ancient guardian of the dark, standing in the mountains, listening to the wind, and holding the endless weight of history in its quiet, unbreakable stillness. Part 12 begins with the Great Wall stretching forward like a path that refuses to end, a stone ribbon laid across the mountains with the stubborn patience of something that has outlived every voice that once commanded it. The daylight is still strong, but it has softened slightly, as if the sun itself is beginning to grow tired of its climb, and the air carries a hint of change. You can feel it in the wind, a cooler breath slipping through the ridges, touching the surface of the wall and reminding you that no matter how bright the day becomes, the night is always waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. The wall is alive with small movements now, distant travelers, occasional echoes of conversation, the faint rhythm of footsteps, but those sounds never dominate. They rise briefly and then dissolve into the vastness, swallowed by the mountains and the endless sky. That is the strange power of this place. It allows human presence, but it never belongs to humans alone. The Great Wall belongs to time, and time has no interest in noise. You continue along a section where the stones feel older, rougher, less restored, and the surface beneath your feet becomes uneven again. Each step demands attention, and that attention pulls you deeper into the wall's reality. You begin to imagine how exhausting it must have been for the soldiers who lived here, not for a few hours like a visitor, but for seasons, for years, perhaps for entire lifetimes. They would have walked these same ridges under the burning sun, under freezing winds, under rain that turned stone slick and dangerous. They would have carried supplies, weapons, messages, and fear, always fear, because the wall was built from fear as much as from stone. It was a response to the unknown, a defense against what lay beyond, and even when no enemy appeared, The possibility of an enemy was enough to keep men awake at night. The night silence we have followed throughout the series was not only peaceful, it was also heavy. The silence of men listening for danger, the silence of breath held in suspense. Now, under the fading warmth of afternoon, you can still sense that tension trapped inside the stones like a memory that refuses to fade. The wall curves ahead and climbs again, and when you reach a higher point, you pause to look down into the valleys. The landscape feels endless, and for a moment you understand why the wall could never fully guarantee safety. Nature itself is too vast, too unpredictable, too open. Even the longest barrier cannot control every path, every hidden trail, every shifting movement of people and animals. The Great Wall was not a perfect shield, but it was a powerful statement. It declared that an empire was willing to spend unimaginable effort to protect itself, that it believed its borders mattered enough to carve a line into the earth. Standing here, you can feel the weight of that statement, and you can also feel the cost. The wall is a monument not only to strength, but to human struggle, because every brick represents labor, and every tower represents time stolen from lives that could have been lived elsewhere. As you continue walking, you find a quiet stretch where the wall seems empty again, where the voices of other visitors vanish, leaving only wind and the occasional call of a bird circling overhead. The silence returns in a softer form, not the deep night silence, but a daytime silence that feels like a pause between worlds. In this pause, the wall feels closer to what it was long ago. You imagine a lone guard standing at the edge of a watchtower, eyes narrowed against the sun, scanning the horizon for movement. You imagine the sound of armor shifting, the scrape of boots on stone, the smell of dust and sweat and smoke from distant fires. You imagine how the guard would have felt the same wind you feel now, how he would have watched the same mountains, and how he might have wondered if anyone would remember him when his duty ended. The Great Wall remembers him, even if the world does not, because the wall is made from the lives of men like him. That is why it feels so alive in silence. It holds more than stone. It holds the echoes of forgotten people. The afternoon continues to drift toward evening, and the light changes subtly, turning warmer, casting longer shadows along the wall's surface. The watchtowers begin to look more dramatic again, their outlines sharp against the sky, and the ridges ahead appear darker, as if the mountains are preparing to reclaim the wall in shadow. This is the moment when the wall begins to transform again, not fully into night, but into the border between day and night, the time when the world becomes quieter and the air grows colder. You realize that this transition might be the most haunting time of all, because it carries both clarity and mystery. The wall is still visible, still detailed, but the shadows are returning, and with them comes the feeling that something unseen is moving closer. The Great Wall at dusk feels like a doorway, a threshold into the silence we have been chasing since the beginning. You stop near another watchtower and look inside. The interior is darker now, and the coolness is stronger. The stone seems to drink the fading light, holding onto it only briefly before letting it go. You stand there for a moment and listen, and the quiet feels thicker, like the world is slowly lowering its voice. Outside, the wind continues, but it sounds different now, deeper, more distant, as if it is speaking in an older language. You step back out and see the wall ahead, and you understand that the night silence is not something separate from the wall. It is part of it, like a second skin. The wall was born in a world where night meant danger, and so it carries the night within its identity. Even when crowds come and go, even when daylight makes everything seem ordinary, the wall never forgets what it was built for. It never forgets the fear of darkness, the duty of watchfulness, the loneliness of guarding a border that stretched farther than the eye could see. As Part 12 ends, the sun begins to lower toward the mountains, and the Great Wall prepares to return to its most powerful form. The shadows grow longer, the air grows colder, and the first hints of true night begin to gather along the ridges. You keep walking forward, knowing that soon the voices will fade again, the world will fall silent, and the Great Wall will once more become the ancient guardian of the dark, standing in the mountains, listening to the wind, and holding the endless weight of history in its quiet, unbreakable stillness. Part 13 begins in the slow, breathless moment when the sun is no longer fully in control of the sky, when daylight starts to loosen its grip and the Great Wall seems to sense the return of its oldest companion, darkness. The mountains ahead wear a softer color now, their sharp edges fading into warm shadows, and the wall stretches across them like a line drawn between two worlds. This is the hour when the air changes first, when the warmth of stone begins to disappear and the wind turns cooler, slipping along the ridges as if it is searching for every crack and corner where night can settle. The Great Wall feels different at this time, as if it is waking up in a deeper way, not with noise or movement, but with presence. The daytime visitors have thinned out, their voices fading into distance, and even when you still hear footsteps somewhere behind you, they feel far away, like sounds from another life. The silence begins to gather again, slowly and patiently, and you realize that the wall has been waiting for this moment all day, the moment when it becomes itself once more. As you walk forward, the stones beneath your feet hold the last of the day's warmth, but that warmth is fading, and with every step you feel the shift from comfort to chill. The shadows of the watchtowers stretch longer across the wall's surface, turning the path into a corridor of dark shapes and pale light. The towers look taller now, more dramatic, their broken edges sharp against the sky, and the openings in their walls appear like eyes watching you pass. It is easy to imagine ancient guards standing in those openings, staring out into the dusk, waiting for the first sign of movement beyond the border. In the fading light, the wall's history feels closer, because the modern world becomes less visible. The details of restoration blur, and what remains is the raw outline of an ancient defense line, a structure built not for beauty, but for survival. You pause at a high point and look out across the valleys. The landscape is quieter now, the distant paths below barely visible, and the sky is beginning to change color, shifting from bright blue into deeper tones that feel heavier, more serious. The Great Wall has always belonged to the sky as much as it belongs to the earth, and at dusk, that relationship becomes clearer. The wall seems to rise toward the fading light, as if it is trying to hold on to the day, yet it also accepts the night with calm inevitability. You can feel that acceptance in the way the wind moves, in the way the stones grow colder, in the way the silence returns without resistance. This is not a sudden silence like a door slamming shut, but a slow silence like a blanket being pulled over the world. It wraps around the wall, around the mountains, around you, and it makes everything feel more intimate, more focused. Your own breathing becomes louder in your ears, your footsteps sound sharper against the stone, and every small movement feels like it matters. You reach a watchtower and step inside, and the darkness in the interior is deeper now than it was earlier. The stone walls hold cold air like a secret, and the smell of dust and age feels stronger. You stand still and listen. Outside, the wind moves along the wall, and it sounds like a distant whisper, a voice speaking in fragments. Inside, there is almost nothing, only the quiet and the faint echo of your own presence. You imagine what it must have been like for a soldier to sit here at dusk, waiting for night to fully arrive. He would have known that the hardest hours were coming, when visibility would vanish and every shadow could hide danger. He would have checked his weapons, adjusted his clothing against the cold, and listened for the signal that meant action. The Great Wall was not only stone, it was a network of communication, of fires and smoke and urgent messages traveling from tower to tower. At dusk, the first torches would have been lit, and the watchtowers would have begun to glow like scattered stars along the ridges. That image feels powerful now, because you can almost see it in your mind, the line of flames stretching across the mountains, warning the empire that the night was beginning. You step back out onto the wall, and the sky has darkened more. The sun is nearly gone, leaving only a thin band of light near the horizon, and the mountains are becoming silhouettes. The wall ahead is still visible, but less detailed, its stones blending into a darker path. This is where the Great Wall's night silence begins to feel real again, not as a memory, but as a living atmosphere. The world below is quiet, and the world above is opening into a vast, deep sky. The first stars appear faintly, and the air feels sharper, cleaner, as if the coming night is washing away the noise of the day. You continue walking, and the wall seems to guide you forward like an ancient road leading into the unknown. Each watchtower you pass feels like a checkpoint between worlds, a reminder that this place was once a frontier where safety ended and uncertainty began. In the growing darkness, your imagination becomes more active. You start to see shapes in the shadows, not because anything is truly there, but because the mind naturally fills silence with stories. That is the power of the Great Wall at night. It invites the imagination to step into history. It makes you feel the loneliness of guards who watched these ridges for years, the tension of waiting for an enemy that might never come, the quiet courage of standing in the dark with only stone and wind as companions. The night's silence is not empty. It is full of invisible weight. It carries the memory of fear, of duty, of endurance, and it turns the wall into something almost spiritual, a place where the past feels closer than the present. As Part 13 ends, the last light fades completely, and the Great Wall becomes a dark line against a sky filled with growing stars. The wind continues its endless journey along the ridges, whispering through cracks and broken stones, and the silence settles fully, deep and unbroken. You stand there in the darkness and realize that the Great Wall's true voice is not heard in crowds or daylight, but in moments like this, when the world grows quiet, when the night takes over and the wall becomes what it has always been, an ancient guardian holding the secrets of history in the stillness of the mountains. Part 14 begins with the Great Wall fully surrendered to night, the last trace of daylight erased from the horizon, as if the sky has closed its eyes. The mountains have become dark shapes, silent giants resting beneath the stars, and the wall lies across them like a shadow made of stone. In this darkness, the world feels larger and smaller at the same time, larger because the sky stretches endlessly above you, filled with distant lights that seem eternal, and smaller because your own presence feels fragile against the ancient weight of the wall. The silence is deeper now, not the gentle quiet of dusk but the true night silence, thick and steady, pressing against your ears until even the smallest sound feels sharp. Your footsteps on the stones seem louder than they should, the scrape of a shoe against brick echoing briefly before being swallowed by the wind. The Great Wall at night is no longer a monument you simply observe. It becomes an experience that surrounds you, pulling you into its cold air and its endless stillness. The stones beneath your hands feel colder now, almost damp with night air, and when you touch them you can feel how the wall absorbs the darkness, holding it like a memory it refuses to release. The watchtowers rise ahead like silent guardians, their openings black and empty, yet somehow watching. It is easy to understand why legends would grow in a place like this, why people would whisper stories about spirits, lost soldiers, and voices carried by the wind. In the ancient world, the night was filled with mystery because it hid everything, and the Great Wall was a line drawn across that mystery, a place where men stood between what was known and what was feared. You keep walking, and the path becomes harder to read. The wall is still there, solid and real, but the details fade, and you begin to rely on instinct and careful steps. The darkness changes the shape of the world, turning familiar stones into uncertain shadows, making every uneven brick a possible danger. This is the kind of darkness the soldiers would have known, the kind that demanded patience and attention, because one careless moment could mean a fall, an injury, or worse. Yet despite the danger, there is also a strange calm. The Great Wall feels peaceful at night in a way that daylight cannot offer, because the night strips away distraction and leaves only the essentials: stone, wind, sky, and silence. You pause near a watchtower and look out beyond the wall. The land outside the Empire's ancient borders is invisible now, hidden under darkness, and that invisibility feels powerful. In ancient times, that unseen land would have been the source of fear and uncertainty, a place where enemies could move without warning. The Great Wall was built to face that darkness, to stand against the unknown. Even now, centuries later, the wall still feels like it is facing something beyond sight, as if its purpose has not completely faded. You step into the watchtower, And the darkness inside is even deeper, a blackness that seems to swallow light entirely. The air is cold and still, and the silence feels heavier, almost physical. You imagine a soldier sitting here long ago, wrapped in thick clothing, listening to the wind outside and waiting for the hours to pass. His eyes would have strained to see movement, his ears would have searched for the faintest sound, and his mind would have been filled with thoughts of home, fear, and duty. The wall demanded more than strength. It demanded endurance, the ability to remain awake in silence, to remain alert in darkness, to remain steady when the world offered no comfort. You step back out, and the stars above seem brighter now, scattered across the sky like 1,000 watchfires lit by the universe itself. The Great Wall beneath them feels like a bridge between earth and sky, a path that leads not to a destination, but to a feeling. The wind rises slightly, moving along the ridges, and it carries a sound that is both gentle and unsettling. It is not a human voice, yet it can feel like one, because the mind wants to translate silence into meaning. This is where the wall becomes almost alive, not because it moves, but because it holds so much memory that it seems to breathe through the wind. You continue walking and pass another tower, then another, and the repetition becomes hypnotic. Tower after tower, stone after stone, the wall stretches onward, and you begin to understand how endless it must have felt to the men who guarded it. Their lives were measured in long nights like this, nights when nothing happened but waiting, nights when the silence itself became the enemy. The Great Wall's night silence is beautiful, but it is also cruel, because it forces you to confront time. It reminds you how slowly hours pass when you are alone, how heavy the dark can feel when you cannot escape it, how the mind can turn silence into fear. Yet at the same time, that silence can also become strength. In the quiet, a person learns patience. In the darkness, a person learns courage. The soldiers of the wall were shaped by nights like this, and the wall itself became a symbol not only of defense, but of human resilience. You stop again and look back along the path you have walked. Behind you, the wall disappears into darkness, its line broken by the shapes of towers and the curves of the mountains. Ahead of you, it continues, vanishing into the same unknown. This is the most haunting truth of the Great Wall at night. It feels endless, like it has no beginning and no end, only a constant presence. The modern world is far away now, reduced to nothing but a distant memory. There are no lights here, no signs, no noise, only the ancient structure and the night that surrounds it. You can almost believe that you have stepped out of time, that the centuries have folded, and that somewhere beyond the next tower a guard might still be waiting, torch in hand, watching the horizon. As part 14 ends, the silence becomes complete, and you realize that this is the Great Wall's truest form. In daylight it is admired, photographed, and explored, but in the night it is felt. In the night it becomes a living shadow of history, a guardian of secrets, a reminder of fear and endurance, and a place where the world grows quiet enough for the past to speak without words. Part 15 begins with the night fully settled over the Great Wall, as if the mountains themselves have fallen into a deep sleep and left the wall to keep watch alone. The sky above is vast and dark, scattered with stars that seem sharper and colder than any seen from a city, and the wind moves along the ridge like an unseen traveler who never tires. The wall beneath your feet feels firm yet strangely alive, its stones holding the chill of the night and the weight of centuries in equal measure. In this darkness, the Great Wall no longer feels like a tourist destination or a famous monument. It feels like a boundary between worlds, a place where the present fades away and the past steps forward, silent but powerful. The air is colder now, and every breath you take becomes more noticeable, a small cloud of warmth disappearing into the night. Your footsteps sound louder than before, echoing briefly against stone, and then dissolving into the open space beyond the wall. The silence around you is not empty. It is thick, layered, and watchful, the kind of silence that makes the mind alert even when there is no clear reason to be afraid. You walk forward slowly, letting your eyes adjust to the darkness, and you begin to notice how the wall changes shape in the night. The edges blur, the details fade, and what remains is the outline of something enormous and ancient stretching across the mountains like a shadow that refuses to move. The watchtowers appear ahead as darker shapes against the sky, and the openings in their walls look like black windows staring into the world. You approach one of them and pause, listening carefully. There is no obvious sound except the wind, yet the wind itself carries so many small variations that it feels like a voice speaking in a language too old to understand. It rises, falls, whistles softly through cracks, then quiets again, as if it is searching for something. In ancient times, the men who guarded the wall would have listened to this same wind and tried to separate harmless sounds from dangerous ones. They would have asked themselves whether that distant rustle was only a tree moving or the approach of footsteps, whether that faint echo was only stone settling or a signal from another tower. Night demanded suspicion, because darkness hides truth. The Great Wall was built to face that darkness, to give the Empire a chance to see danger before it arrived, but at night even the wall could not see far. It could only stand, endure, and wait. You step into the watchtower, and the darkness inside feels deeper than the night outside, a heavy blackness that seems to swallow the stars. The air is still, cold, and dry, and the silence is so complete that it feels almost sacred. You imagine a soldier here long ago, sitting with his back against the wall, eyes half open, trying to stay awake while the hours crawled forward. He would have been surrounded by the same darkness, the same cold stone, the same endless waiting. His world would have been measured by small moments, the passing of a torch flame, the sound of a distant call, the relief of dawn finally arriving. The Great Wall's night silence is not just peaceful, it is a test. It tests patience, it tests courage, and it tests the human mind's ability to remain steady when nothing happens and everything feels uncertain. You step back out and continue walking along the wall, and the path ahead seems to narrow as the darkness thickens. The stones are uneven in places, and you move carefully, aware that one misstep could send you stumbling. This careful movement makes you feel closer to the ancient guards because their lives would have depended on caution. A fall from the wall could mean injury or death, and in the night there would be no easy rescue. Yet despite the danger, there is also a strange comfort in the wall's solidity. It is cold, rough, and unyielding, but it is reliable. It stands when everything else is hidden, and that reliability is what made it a symbol of protection. The wall could not stop every threat, but it offered something priceless, a place to stand, a line to hold, a structure that turned fear into strategy. You stop again and look out across the darkness beyond the wall. The land is invisible, and the horizon is gone, erased by night. This emptiness feels endless, like an ocean of shadow, and you understand why the unknown was so terrifying to ancient empires. Beyond the wall lay uncertainty, raiders, armies, strangers, and forces that could not be controlled. The wall was an answer to that uncertainty, a statement that the empire would not simply accept fear, but would build against it. Yet standing here now, you realize that fear never truly disappears. It changes shape. It becomes the fear of silence, the fear of being alone, the fear of what might be hidden in the dark. The Great Wall does not remove those fears. It teaches you to stand with them, to endure them, to walk forward even when you cannot see what lies ahead. The stars above continue to shine, and for a moment you feel the strange contrast between the sky's beauty and the wall's harsh reality. The sky is open, infinite, and calm, while the wall is heavy, grounded, and marked by struggle. Together they create a scene that feels almost unreal, like a dream built from stone and starlight. You pass another watchtower, then another, and the rhythm of walking becomes meditative. Each step is steady, each breath measured, each moment stretched by silence. You begin to sense that the wall is not only a place of defense, but also a place of reflection. In the night silence, the mind becomes clearer because there is nothing else to focus on. You think about the lives that were lived here, the sacrifices made, the hopes and fears carried by men who never knew whether their names would be remembered. The Great Wall remembers them in its own way, not through words, but through presence. It holds their stories in the cold stone, in the cracks worn by time, in the towers that still stand despite everything. As part 15 ends, the wind quiets for a brief moment, and the silence becomes even deeper, so deep it feels like the world has paused. You stand on the wall beneath the stars and realize that this silence is not emptiness. It is history breathing slowly in the dark. It is the Great Wall's true voice, speaking without sound, reminding you that endurance is not loud or dramatic. Sometimes endurance is simply standing in the night, unmoving, unbroken, and refusing to disappear. Part 16 begins in the deepest stretch of night, when time feels slower and the Great Wall seems to exist outside the ordinary rhythm of the world. The sky is still crowded with stars, but the air has grown colder, sharper, and more demanding, pressing against your skin and making every breath feel like a reminder that you are only a visitor here. The wall beneath your feet is silent and steady, its stones darkened by the night, its edges softened by shadow, yet its presence is undeniable, like a living line of memory carved into the mountains. The wind has calmed compared to earlier hours, but it has not disappeared. It moves in small waves, slipping along the ridges and passing through cracks in the stone with a quiet whistle that rises and fades like a distant warning. In this moment, the Great Wall does not feel like something built long ago. It feels like something that is still doing its job, still watching, still guarding, still standing between what is known and what is hidden. You continue walking, and the world around you seems to shrink into a narrow circle of awareness. Stone underfoot, cold air in your lungs, darkness beyond the wall, and the faint outline of watchtowers ahead. The silence is so complete that it becomes a sound of its own, a pressure that makes you listen harder even when there is nothing to hear. You begin to understand that the wall's night silence is not passive. It is active, demanding, shaping the mind. It pulls your thoughts inward and forces you to confront the simple truth that the night does not care about comfort. Ancient soldiers would have known this truth well. They would have stood here in these hours when the world was at its quietest and most dangerous, when the smallest movement could mean everything, when a single spark of fire or a single shout could decide the fate of a border. The Great Wall was built to give them a chance, but the night was still the night, wide, dark, and full of uncertainty. As you approach another watchtower, you notice how the darkness makes it appear larger than it is, as if the tower grows in importance when the world loses detail. You step closer and run your hand along the stone, feeling the rough surface, the coldness that seems to seep into your fingers. These stones have endured countless nights like this, nights of fear and boredom, nights of wind and snow, nights of whispered prayers and quiet curses. The wall has heard everything, yet it has never spoken. Its silence is not ignorance. It is endurance. You step inside the tower, and the interior feels like a pocket of deeper darkness, a place where the cold settles and the air barely moves. In ancient times, this space would have held torches, supplies, perhaps the soft murmur of men speaking low so their voices would not carry into the night. It might have held the sound of a soldier sharpening a blade, the quiet crackle of fire, the faint cough of someone trying not to wake others. Now, it holds only emptiness and the echo of your imagination. You stand still, and for a moment you can almost feel the presence of those who once lived here, not as ghosts, but as impressions, as shadows left behind by human life repeated so many times that the stone itself seems to remember. You step back out and continue along the wall, and the path feels longer now, as if the night is stretching it. The mountains around you are silent, and the darkness beyond the wall is absolute, hiding every detail of the land. In ancient times, that darkness would have been the enemy's greatest weapon because it could hide movement, hide intent, hide danger until it was too late. That is why the Great Wall depended on watchfulness, on discipline, on signals that could pierce the night. Fires lit on towers were not just light, they were language. Smoke by day and flame by night carried messages across vast distances, turning the wall into a living network of warning. You imagine those fires now, one after another, appearing along the ridges like a chain of stars fallen to earth. You imagine the tension in the air when a distant flame appeared unexpectedly, the rush of men waking, the urgent preparation, the fear turning into action. Even when no attack came, the possibility was enough to keep hearts racing. The night silence was never truly peaceful for those who guarded the wall, because peace was fragile, and darkness could break it at any moment. You stop again and look up at the sky. The stars feel closer now, brighter against the blackness, and the Milky Way stretches faintly like a pale river across the heavens. This sight fills you with a strange calm, because it reminds you that the wall, for all its power, is still small compared to the universe. Empires rise and fall, borders shift, walls crumble, but the stars remain, watching silently as they always have. The Great Wall is ancient, but the sky is older. In this moment, the wall feels less like a symbol of control and more like a symbol of humanity's attempt to find stability in a world that cannot be fully controlled. The wall was built to draw a line, but the night shows you that lines are fragile. Darkness ignores borders. Wind crosses freely. Time moves without permission. Yet the wall stands anyway, and that standing is its meaning. You continue walking, and your body begins to feel the cold more strongly. The stones are icy now, and the air bites at your skin, making you pull inward, making you move with purpose. This physical discomfort brings you closer again to the ancient guards, because their duty was not romantic. It was hard, repetitive, exhausting. They would have fought sleep, fought cold, fought loneliness. They would have stared into darkness until their eyes burned, listening for sounds that might never come. Some nights would have been quiet, others filled with panic, but every night demanded the same thing: endurance. The Great Wall is a monument to that endurance, not only of stone, but of people. As Part 16 ends, the wind returns in a stronger gust, rushing along the wall and making the watchtowers groan softly, as if the structure itself is speaking in its own language of stone and air. The silence remains, deep and unbroken, but now it feels alive, charged with the sense that the night is not over yet. Somewhere beyond the mountains, dawn is still far away, and the Great Wall continues to stand in the darkness, holding its ancient watch, carrying its endless history, and reminding you that the truest strength is not in loud victory, but in the quiet ability to remain unshaken through the longest night. Part 17 begins in the profound quiet that settles over the Great Wall as the night deepens further, when even the faintest movements of wind and stone seem amplified against the vast darkness. The stars above shimmer cold and distant, yet they give the landscape a fragile illumination, casting silvered outlines along the ridges and revealing the wall as a serpentine shadow stretching endlessly across the mountains. The air is heavier now, sharper in the lungs, and every step you take on the worn stone demands deliberate attention. Darkness softens the edges of the wall, blurring towers and curves into a continuous, almost liquid silhouette, and in this uncertainty, your senses heighten. Every faint scrape of stone underfoot, every whisper of wind through cracks, every distant echo becomes significant, as if the night itself is speaking in riddles only the patient can understand. The Great Wall, in this hour, no longer feels like a human construction. It feels elemental, a bridge between earth and sky, between history and the present, between fear and endurance. You walk past a watchtower, its doorway yawning like a dark mouth, and the interior seems to inhale the night, swallowing what little light exists. Inside, the walls hold a chill that seeps into your bones, and you imagine the soldiers who would have taken refuge here centuries ago, bracing against both cold and the suffocating weight of duty. They would have known that even a moment of carelessness could cost lives, that the night could harbor unseen threats, and that silence was both ally and adversary. Yet they endured, not through strength alone, but through relentless persistence, a rhythm of vigilance and waiting that the wall has absorbed into its very stones. Emerging again onto the wall, the wind picks up, whispering through the gaps and jagged edges, carrying with it the scent of distant forests, the sharpness of stone, and the intangible essence of history. The wall feels alive in a subtle way, not moving, but aware, as if it remembers every footstep that has passed along it, every voice that has risen and fallen, every shadow that has shifted in its towers. You pause at a point where the wall curves sharply around a ridge, and you gaze into the valley below, now hidden in deep shadow, almost invisible except for the faintest suggestion of trees and rocks. This obscurity creates a sense of infinity. The land appears endless, and the wall seems simultaneously small and monumental, a lifeline laid across a world too vast for a single human to comprehend. In that moment, you begin to feel the weight of time pressing inward, not as anxiety, but as perspective, the realization that everything here, from brick to ridge to tower, is evidence of human patience, effort, and determination enduring beyond centuries, empires, and dynasties. You notice small imperfections in the stones, cracks, worn edges, uneven surfaces, and they feel less like damage than like signatures, tangible imprints of the countless lives that built, maintained, and patrolled this barrier. Every mark tells a story of effort, fatigue, and resilience, and the night amplifies these whispers into something almost audible, something you can feel in the stillness. You move toward another tower, and the ascent is steep, your breath visible in the cold air. The climb is a reminder of how treacherous this path must have been for those who walked it not as a visitor but as a guard, whose survival depended on each careful step, whose focus could not falter for even a heartbeat. The wall is more than a line of defense. It is a test of human endurance, a monument to vigilance, a record of those who lived and died within its watch. At the top, you pause again, looking both forward and backward along the winding line of stone. The wall seems to vanish into shadow at both ends, stretching beyond what the eye can see, creating the sense that it is both endless and eternal. The night around you makes the silence tangible, pressing gently against your ears, sharpening your awareness, turning every sensation inward. You can feel the ancient presence of those who once occupied the towers, the laborers who carried bricks up the ridges, the soldiers who stood guard through wind, rain, and snow. Their lives have dissolved into the wall, yet they remain in its rhythm, in its pattern, in the very substance of the stones. The wall, under night, transforms from architecture into memory, from structure into narrative, a living record of endurance written in stone. You continue onward, and each tower becomes a milestone, a measure of both distance and time, each curve a testament to the wall's adaptation to the harshness of the terrain, to the necessity of defense, and to the vision of those who conceived it. The night makes these lessons clearer than the day could, because it removes distraction, leaving only presence, thought, and the whispered cadence of stone underfoot. As Part 17 progresses, the wind rises again, sweeping along the wall with a low, resonant hum that feels like it carries messages from centuries past. The stars above have multiplied, and the Milky Way stretches faintly like a pale river across the sky, mirroring the winding path of the wall below. You realize that for those who built it, the wall was a lifeline, a line of sight across a treacherous world, and for those who patrol it now, it is both memory and experience, connecting the present to countless nights like this one. The wall is endurance made tangible, vigilance made visible, history made immediate, and in its night silence, it communicates the power of time, persistence, and human courage without uttering a single word. As Part 17 ends, the darkness deepens further, and the wall stands unbroken, the mountains around it submerged in shadow, the stars above steady and eternal. You feel the full weight of the night, the silence, and the centuries pressing together, and you understand that the Great Wall's truest form is not in stone alone, but in the quiet, unwavering presence it maintains when the world sleeps, holding the stories of humanity in the stillness of the mountains, waiting for dawn but never needing it to assert its power. Part 18 begins in the profound stillness that has settled over the Great Wall, a silence so complete it seems to press against the mountains themselves, holding every ridge, every valley, every tower in a weightless suspension. The stars above are numerous and sharp, their cold light falling upon the stones and illuminating the wall in a fragile, silver glow. The air is crisp and carries the subtle scent of distant forests and earth, and each breath feels vivid, almost intrusive, as if the night itself notices your presence. Walking along the wall now, you sense the enormity of the structure not just in length, but in purpose, in the labor and time etched into every brick and every scar on the towers. The shadows stretch long and distorted across the ridges, transforming the familiar shapes into something almost otherworldly, and with each step you feel the rhythm of countless footsteps that have passed here before. The night heightens your awareness, and the wall, though silent, speaks through the texture of stone, through the cold touch of wind, through the curve of each ascent and descent, whispering the stories of those who built and guarded it. Every watchtower seems to hold a secret. Its doorway is dark and empty, yet it feels charged with the presence of centuries. You pause at one such tower, letting your hand brush the rough, uneven stones, imagining the ancient soldiers who would have rested here in long shifts, bracing against both the cold and the burden of vigilance. Their eyes would have scanned the horizon endlessly, attuned to the faintest rustle in the darkness, and every sound, whether the sigh of the wind or the distant crack of a branch, would have been scrutinized, measured, and interpreted. The wall's night silence is deceptive in its calm, for it was forged to counteract uncertainty, to provide a lifeline against the unseen threats that the dark hides. Stepping back onto the pathway, you notice the wall's curvature and its gradual adaptation to the mountains, how it rises and falls according to the ridges, bending when the terrain demands, yet always extending forward with unwavering resolve. Each stone is a testament to patience and purpose, every worn edge a signature of endurance. The wall at night magnifies these truths, stripping away the distractions of day, leaving only the essential elements: stone, sky, wind, and silence. The air has grown colder still, biting through layers of clothing, forcing your movements to become deliberate, careful. The uneven surface of the wall reminds you that its builders contended with the same cold, the same fatigue, the same relentless repetition. They carried bricks, tools, and weapons up steep ridges, layer by layer, hour by hour, night after night, and in that effort, the wall became more than a barrier. It became a record of human perseverance. You pass another tower, its silhouette stark against the starlit sky, and for a moment, it feels alive, not in motion, but in presence, as if it has absorbed the countless moments of vigilance and labor that passed within it. The night amplifies the wall's longevity. Centuries of storms, battles, and neglect seem compressed into a palpable energy that fills the mountains with quiet authority. Looking out over the valleys now, you see nothing but darkness, a void that was once the source of constant anxiety for the men stationed here. The unseen enemy, the hidden paths, the uncertainty of what lay beyond each ridge, these were the realities the wall was built to confront. And yet, in this contemporary night, the darkness feels less threatening and more expansive, a canvas on which the wall stretches endlessly, asserting not just defense, but endurance, human ambition, and an intimate connection to the land. The wind rises slightly, carrying a low, resonant hum along the ridges, a sound that seems to echo both outward into the valleys and inward into the watchtowers. It is as if the wall itself breathes, drawing in the night, holding it, then releasing it in subtle waves that remind you of the weight of solitude, the necessity of alertness, the inescapable passage of time. You walk on, climbing gently as the wall rises along a ridge, the stones cold and rough under your hands, guiding you upward. Every step is measured, deliberate, an echo of the countless soldiers whose lives revolved around the same careful movement. The wall was both a lifeline and a prison, a place of protection, yet also a place of confinement, where duty dictated every motion and every thought. You pause again at a tower, peering into its black interior, and for a moment, you imagine the torchlight flickering within centuries ago, shadows dancing along the walls, whispers of men waiting, listening, enduring. That presence is still felt, not in ghosts or voices, but in the stones themselves, which have absorbed the passage of time and the rhythm of countless nights. Continuing along the wall, the path narrows in places, forcing you to concentrate, forcing you to be present in each motion. The surrounding mountains are lost to shadow, and the wall seems to float between earth and sky, a line that simultaneously anchors and transcends the landscape. This tension between permanence and fragility, between human endeavor and natural vastness, is the essence of the wall at night. It teaches endurance in silence, vigilance without reward, presence without acknowledgement. The stars above continue their slow, eternal motion, and for a brief moment, the Milky Way aligns faintly with the wall below, a mirror of endless paths, a cosmic reflection of human effort stretching across the mountains. The air is still, save for occasional whispers of wind, and you realize that the wall's true lesson is not in its stones, nor in its towers, but in the quiet understanding that history is a weight that endures only when witnessed, when walked, when felt. As Part 18 ends, you pause on the ridge, looking both back along the winding line of stone and forward into darkness that seems to have no end. The night is complete, the stars steady, the wind subtle but insistent, and the great wall stands unmoved, holding its vigil, preserving the memory of countless nights, countless lives, and countless moments of courage, endurance, and quiet resilience. In this stillness, you understand that the wall's power is not in battles fought or borders defended, but in the patience, presence, and silence it has carried through centuries, a sentinel of stone forever intertwined with the mountains and the night. Part 19 begins in the profound isolation of night, when the great wall seems to dissolve into shadow, and only the faint silver glow of starlight reveals the sharp ridges and uneven surfaces beneath your feet. The wind moves in irregular whispers along the mountains, carrying with it the scent of cold stone, distant pine, and the intangible weight of centuries, and every inhalation feels like drinking history itself. The wall stretches before you like a dark, endless ribbon, curving and rising along the ridges as if it has been laid across the mountains by some patient, eternal hand. In this hour, it no longer feels like a human construction but a living boundary, bridging past and present, earth and sky, silence and memory. The stones beneath your hands are rough and icy, absorbing the night and radiating a stillness that presses upon your senses, demanding attention, focus, and reverence. Each step is deliberate. Each pause feels meaningful. The night sharpens perception and heightens awareness, making every crack, every edge, every uneven brick significant. The Great Wall's night silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is presence, and its presence is vast and uncompromising. You approach a watchtower, its doorway yawning like a dark sentinel, and step inside. The interior is colder, heavier, and somehow more intimate than the open path. You imagine the soldiers who once occupied this space, huddled against the stone, bracing themselves against both cold and fear. They would have waited for hours, eyes fixed on the horizon, ears attuned to the smallest shift in wind or shadow, heart steady but tense, knowing that danger could appear at any moment. The wall gave them a vantage point, but it could not eliminate uncertainty that remained, hovering in every corner, woven into the night. You step back onto the path, feeling the uneven stones beneath your feet, and continue forward. The wall rises along a ridge, demanding careful steps, as it would have demanded of the guards centuries ago. The ascent is slow, each step reminding you that endurance is physical as much as mental. The wall is a test, not merely of skill but of persistence, and its power lies in that ongoing challenge. From this height, the surrounding mountains are lost to darkness, their form suggested only by subtle shifts in shadow. The wall appears to float above the terrain, a dark, winding thread connecting distant peaks, a human presence stretched across an indifferent landscape. It is easy to imagine ancient armies moving unseen in the valleys below, the fear of invasion always present, the necessity of vigilance never ending. The wall was both shield and statement, a demonstration of the empire's resolve to protect its people, its culture, and its borders. Yet in the quiet of night, it reveals something more profound, the persistence of human effort, the endurance of those who lived, worked and waited here, their presence absorbed into stone, time, and memory. You continue past another tower, each one identical yet unique, each one a milestone marking both distance and history. The wind carries a low, resonant hum along the ridges, a voice without words, echoing faintly off the towers, reminding you that the wall is not passive. It is a participant in the night, a silent observer, a keeper of stories that cannot be read but can be felt. You pause at a bend where the wall drops into shadow and look back along the line you have traversed. The towers recede like dark teeth against the starlit sky, and the path seems infinite, disappearing into both history and darkness simultaneously. You realize that for the soldiers, the endlessness of the wall was not a romantic concept but a practical one. The length and continuity demanded constant attention, constant presence, constant endurance. Night magnifies that truth, for in darkness, the human mind measures time differently, and hours stretch without relief. Shadows take on weight, and silence becomes tangible. You climb again, and the cold bites deeper, making your muscles tighten, your breath visible, each movement deliberate. The wall here is more ancient, less restored, its stones worn smooth in places, jagged in others, uneven and treacherous. Every step requires attention, echoing the dangers faced by those who guarded this frontier long ago. The wall is unforgiving in its physical demands, yet it offers perspective. The landscape is vast, the mountains eternal, and human effort, though temporary, leaves traces that endure. You pause near a tower to look into its black interior, imagining the torchlight flickering centuries ago, shadows moving across the walls, low murmurs of soldiers exchanging information, checking weapons, adjusting cloaks, listening to the wind as it carried both warning and reassurance. The wall is more than stone. It is memory, discipline, and continuity made physical, a record of human vigilance that the night makes palpable. You step out again and continue along the winding ridge, each tower a reminder of distance, each curve a lesson in adaptation, each shadow a bridge to the past. The stars above continue their silent procession, and the Milky Way faintly mirrors the path below, connecting heaven and earth, eternity and endurance. As Part 19 ends, the wind rises once more, moving along the ridges with a low, whispering roar, the wall groaning softly as if acknowledging the passage of centuries and nights. Darkness is complete now, the valleys invisible, the towers sharp against the sky, and the great wall remains steadfast, a monument to resilience, patience, and the quiet courage of countless lives. Standing there, you realize that its truest power lies not in defense, not in conquest, not in borders, but in endurance, the ability to remain unmoved through centuries, to hold history, memory, and silence in its stones, and to remind anyone who walks it at night that presence itself can be a form of immortality. Part 20 begins in the heart of night, when the great wall stretches before you like a dark, winding spine across the mountains, and the stars above cast a cold, fragile light that barely illuminates the uneven stones beneath your feet. The air is sharp and still, carrying the scent of stone, earth, and distant forests, and every breath feels like a connection to the centuries of labor and vigilance embedded in this ancient structure. The wall is no longer merely a monument. It is a living witness to time, a presence that absorbs the silence of night and reflects it back with a weight that presses gently against the senses. As you walk along the ridges, each curve of the wall feels deliberate, as though it was carved not only to follow the terrain but to endure it, to rise against wind, cold, and the slow erosion of centuries. The stones underfoot are rough, uneven, and icy in places, demanding careful attention with each step, echoing the vigilance required of the soldiers who once patrolled these heights. The night amplifies every sound, the faint scrape of a shoe on stone, the subtle shift of wind along the ridges, the distant whisper of air moving through cracks in the towers. This is the wall's voice at night, quiet but insistent, a chorus of memory and endurance. You pause near a watchtower, its dark opening standing like a sentinel against the night. Stepping inside, The interior is colder, heavier, and almost intimate in its emptiness. You imagine the soldiers of centuries past, huddled in thick clothing, bracing against the chill while their eyes strained to pierce the darkness outside, ears attuned to every sound, waiting for hours that could stretch endlessly. In those long nights, vigilance was both routine and strain, a test of patience, alertness, and quiet courage. Outside, the wall continues its endless curve, disappearing into shadows that hide valleys and ridges alike, creating the sense that it is floating between earth and sky, a dark thread woven into the mountains themselves. You move onward, feeling the cold stones guide your steps, each tower you pass marking both distance and history. The repetition of the towers becomes hypnotic, each one similar yet distinct, each one a milestone in a path that has been walked by countless soldiers over centuries. The wind rises in soft gusts, flowing along the ridges and echoing faintly through the towers, carrying a resonance that feels like a message from the past. It reminds you that the wall is not passive. It is a participant in time, a witness, a keeper of memory. The night magnifies its presence, making the wall feel alive not through motion, but through the weight of endurance it embodies. You climb a particularly steep section, and the stones are icy under your hands, forcing careful, deliberate movement. Every step is a small exercise in patience and awareness, echoing the vigilance demanded of those who walked these paths as part of their duty. The wall is as unforgiving physically as it is spiritually. It tests resolve, endurance, and presence, and the night accentuates every challenge. Pausing again at a tower, you peer into the darkness of its interior. You imagine torches flickering centuries ago, casting shadows that danced across stone walls, and low murmurs of men exchanging information, checking weapons, or listening for sounds carried by the wind. The tower is more than stone. It is memory, discipline, and continuity, a repository of human effort, fear, and patience. Outside, the wall snakes onward, each curve and rise an exercise in design, defense, and determination. The night removes distractions, leaving only presence, stone, sky, and silence. You look out across the valleys, hidden entirely in shadow, and imagine the unknown dangers the wall was meant to guard against: raiders, armies, and threats unseen in the darkness. That uncertainty is mirrored in your own experience walking the wall at night, as the darkness transforms familiar shapes into ambiguous shadows, and each step carries the tension of anticipation. The stars above continue their silent procession, and the Milky Way faintly mirrors the line of the wall below, connecting heaven and earth, eternity and human endeavor. The wind shifts again, brushing across the ridges with a soft, low hum that echoes against the towers, a subtle reminder of the power and persistence contained within this structure. As you continue along the path, the wall's repetition and continuity become meditative. Each tower, each curve, each shadow is a lesson in resilience. The wall embodies the patience and persistence required to endure both physical and temporal challenges. You begin to feel the weight of centuries pressing in, not oppressively, but with a sense of reverence for those who built, maintained, and guarded this boundary. The wall has witnessed countless nights like this, and now it witnesses yours. As Part 20 ends, the wind rises slightly, rustling along the ridges, the towers standing silent but commanding, and the Great Wall remains steadfast, a testament to human endurance, courage, and vigilance. The night is complete, the stars constant, the darkness unbroken, and the wall's true power is revealed not in its stone alone, but in its ability to hold time, memory, and presence, silently enduring through the longest, coldest nights. Part 21 begins in the stillest hours of night, when the Great Wall stretches endlessly into shadow, and the stars above hang like distant lanterns suspended in a vast, cold sky. The mountains surrounding it have vanished into blackness, leaving only the wall's serpentine silhouette visible under the fragile silver glow of starlight. The air is sharp, carrying the scent of stone, pine, and earth, and each breath feels weighty, as though drawing in centuries of labor, vigilance, and endurance embedded in every brick. Walking along the ridges, the wall feels less like a structure and more like a living testament, absorbing silence and radiating it back with presence so palpable it presses on the senses. Each step on the uneven, icy stones demands deliberate attention, echoing the cautious pace of the soldiers who once patrolled these heights, eyes scanning the horizon for hours, ears attuned to the faintest sound, hearts steady yet ready. In this hour, the wall is a line between worlds, between earth and sky, past and present, fear and resilience, and its curves, rises, and drops reveal a design that is as much about adaptation to the mountains as it is about defense. You approach a watchtower, its dark doorway like the mouth of a sentinel, and step inside. The interior is heavier, colder, and intimate in its emptiness, the air still except for the faint hum of wind echoing through small openings. You imagine soldiers here long ago, huddled in thick clothing, bracing against the cold and the monotony of vigilance, listening to the whispers of the night, straining to distinguish harmless noises from potential threats. Their lives were measured in patience, endurance, and the rhythm of waiting, and the wall was both their ally and their test. Stepping back onto the pathway, you continue, the wall rising along another ridge, its stones rough and worn, demanding focus with every movement. The path narrows, curves steeply, and drops unexpectedly, forcing awareness with every step. You feel the continuity of the wall, the repetition of towers, each one similar yet unique, each one marking distance and history, forming a rhythm that feels almost meditative. The night magnifies every detail, the texture of stone beneath your hands, the sharpness of the wind, the faint echo of distant mountains, turning the wall into a living, breathing presence. The valleys below are hidden completely in shadow, yet you sense the same uncertainty that would have plagued ancient guards, the unknown dangers lurking in darkness, the uncertainty of what might cross the ridges unseen. This tension transforms the silence into a tangible entity, pressing against your mind, sharpening your awareness. You pause to look along the line of the wall already traversed. The towers recede into darkness like jagged teeth against the starry sky, and the path seems to stretch endlessly, folding past and present together into one continuous thread. The night stretches time itself, hours lose meaning, shadows grow heavier, and each moment of silence becomes a measure of endurance. You climb again, each step forcing careful attention as the wall rises steeply along a ridge. The stones are worn, uneven, and icy, echoing the harsh conditions the guards would have faced. Physical discomfort becomes a connection to history, a reminder that vigilance required not only mental fortitude but physical resilience. At the next tower, you peer into the dark interior, imagining flickering torchlight from centuries ago casting shadows across stone walls, low murmurs of soldiers checking weapons, adjusting cloaks, or exchanging quiet words, all under the watchful silence of the night. The wall is more than stone. It is memory, discipline, and continuity made tangible, a repository of human effort, fear, and endurance. Moving onward, the path undulates, rises, and falls, the towers appearing rhythmically, a steady cadence that mirrors both the physical and temporal dimensions of this structure. The stars above continue their silent passage, the Milky Way faintly mirroring the winding path below, connecting earth and sky, finite effort, and infinite time. The wind rises briefly, sweeping along the ridges and producing a low, resonant hum that echoes against the towers, as if the wall itself breathes, acknowledging the centuries it has endured. The night is complete in its darkness, yet every step reveals a lesson. The wall embodies patience, courage, and the quiet persistence of countless lives. The repetition of towers, the curves of ridges, the cold, uneven stones all serve as reminders of endurance in both physical and temporal forms. You pause again, listening to the subtle hum of wind and the faint echo of your footsteps, feeling the weight of history pressing against the stillness. The wall has witnessed countless nights like this, each one a test of vigilance and resilience, and it continues to hold that presence in its stones, silent yet insistent. As Part 21 ends, the wall stretches endlessly into the blackness ahead, the towers standing like dark sentinels beneath the starlit sky, the wind whispering softly along ridges, and the Great Wall remains unmoved. Its power is not in conquest or defense alone, but in its quiet endurance, in its ability to hold time, memory, and presence through centuries of darkness, and in its unwavering role as a testament to human resilience, patience, and courage under the weight of both history and night. Part 22 begins in the deepest stretch of night, when the Great Wall seems suspended between the mountains and the stars, an endless line of stone threading across shadowed ridges as if drawn by an invisible hand. The darkness is absolute, yet it carries a subtle presence, the weight of centuries pressing down through the stones, the towers, and the very air. Each breath of cold night air feels sharp and alive, filling the lungs with a mixture of earth, pine, and stone, a sensory echo of the countless lives that have passed this way. Walking along the wall, you feel the rhythm of its curves, rises, and descents underfoot, the uneven stones demanding careful, deliberate movement, each step a meditation in balance and attention. The wall's surface is icy in places, worn smooth in others, and every imperfection carries a story of laborers hauling bricks up steep ridges, of soldiers on patrol through rain, wind, and snow, of time itself leaving its mark on every edge and corner. The towers appear like black sentinels against the night sky, each one similar but distinct, each one a milestone of distance and history, each one a silent witness to the struggles of those who guarded the empire. You pause at one of these watchtowers, placing your hands against a cold stone, imagining the torches that once flickered inside, the murmurs of soldiers exchanging messages or checking weapons, the quiet tension of waiting for hours with the horizon as their only companion. The wall was built not merely to defend but to endure, and its endurance is amplified in the night, when the absence of distraction allows the weight of time, effort, and vigilance to be felt in every step, in every touch, in every breath. Moving onward, the path undulates sharply, rising along ridges and dipping into valleys now hidden in shadow. The mountains beyond are invisible, yet you sense the vastness and the same uncertainty that ancient guards would have faced, the potential for unseen threats in every valley and over every ridge. The night amplifies that uncertainty, turning silence into presence, a constant reminder that vigilance is never passive. The wind flows intermittently along the wall, carrying a low, resonant hum that seems to speak without words, echoing softly through towers and gaps, whispering across the ridges, and reminding you that the wall itself has a voice, one forged from endurance, labor, and time. You climb another steep section, each handhold and foothold demanding attention, a physical echo of the centuries of patrols that shaped the wall not only as a line of defense, but as a test of human resilience. The air grows colder, biting through layers of clothing, and the stones are rough and unforgiving, yet beneath your careful steps, you feel the continuity of countless lives walking this path before you. Every tower passed, every curve rounded, every ridge climbed adds to the rhythm of the wall, a repetition that is both physical and temporal, forming a cadence that is almost meditative. The night, in its absolute stillness, accentuates this cadence, making every step deliberate, every movement meaningful, every moment a lesson in endurance and presence. You stop at a particularly high tower and look out over the valleys below, invisible except for subtle shifts in shadow. This emptiness is both beautiful and intimidating. It mirrors the fear that ancient soldiers would have felt and the isolation inherent in guarding a vast, unforgiving border. Yet within that fear is also clarity, a sense of perspective that comes from standing in silence and realizing the magnitude of the effort that created and maintained this monumental structure. You continue along the wall, each tower passing as a marker of time and distance, each curve reminding you that the wall is not a straight line but a living organism, adapted to the terrain, responding to mountains, valleys, and weather alike. The Milky Way stretches faintly across the night sky, mirroring the winding path below, connecting human effort to the cosmos, fleeting lives to eternity. The wall embodies that connection, bridging past and present, human endeavor and natural permanence. The wind rises again, whispering through cracks and gaps, lifting faint echoes from centuries past, reminding you that this is a place shaped not just by stone but by human persistence, discipline, and courage. Each tower, each worn stone, each ridge traversed carries memory, and the night allows those memories to be felt as tangible presence. The wall is at once protective and demanding, a monument to endurance that teaches through silence and observation. As Part 22 comes to a close, you pause atop a ridge, looking along the dark, undulating line of towers and curves, the mountains shrouded in shadow, the stars steady above. The Great Wall stretches endlessly, a testament to human patience, courage, and vigilance. Its power lies not only in its stone or its scale, but in its quiet ability to hold time, memory, and presence across centuries, enduring long nights, harsh winds, and the passage of empires, and reminding all who walk it that true strength is measured not in loud victories, but in steadfast endurance, in silent vigilance, and in the courage to stand unmoved through the darkest hours. Part 23 begins in the profound stillness of the night, when the Great Wall stretches endlessly across ridges and peaks, a dark, winding silhouette under a sky crowded with stars whose cold, distant light shimmers faintly on the worn stones. The air is crisp and carries the faint scent of pine, earth, and ancient stone, each breath a reminder of centuries of labor, vigilance, and endurance compressed into the solid form beneath your feet. Walking along the wall, the uneven, icy stones demand careful attention, and with each deliberate step, you feel closer to the countless soldiers who once patrolled this line, their eyes scanning the darkness, ears attuned to the subtlest sounds, hearts steady yet alert. The wall is more than a physical barrier. It is a testament to patience, resilience, and human determination. Its curves and rises a reflection of both the landscape it inhabits and the demands placed upon those who built and guarded it. You approach a watchtower, its doorway yawning like a sentinel's mouth, dark and cold, absorbing light and sound alike. Inside, the air is heavier, the silence more intimate, and you can almost sense the presence of soldiers long gone, their bodies braced against chill, their minds focused on vigilance, their lives measured in hours of observation and moments of tense anticipation. Every shadow inside the tower seems to hold a fragment of the past, torches flickering, murmurs exchanged, footsteps pacing, weapons checked, cloaks adjusted, and a constant awareness of what might emerge from the night. Stepping back onto the path, the wall continues to rise along another ridge, each stone worn by time, each edge marked by history, demanding careful, deliberate steps. The wind moves in subtle waves, slipping along cracks and gaps, carrying a low, resonant hum that seems to echo from the distant past, reminding you that the wall is not inert but alive with memory, with purpose, with endurance. The valleys below are hidden in shadow, and the mountains beyond fade into darkness, creating an impression of infinite space, of uncertainty, the very conditions the wall was designed to confront. The night transforms these threats into lessons in patience, perception, and presence, forcing you to walk with awareness and humility, understanding that vigilance is a quiet, constant discipline. Each tower passed along the wall becomes a milestone, a marker not only of distance but of history, each one similar yet distinct, carrying the echoes of the lives it sheltered and the labor that shaped it. The repetition forms a rhythm that is both physical and temporal, and the night magnifies that rhythm, giving weight to every movement, sound, and breath. Continuing along the ridge, the wall rises and falls with the terrain, curving sharply over ridges and dipping into valleys, each movement reinforcing the monumental scale of human effort required to construct and maintain such a barrier. The cold bites at your skin, making every motion deliberate, forcing a connection between mind and body that mirrors the discipline of the soldiers who once walked these same stones. The wall is demanding, unforgiving, yet it offers perspective, a sense of scale, of endurance, and of human ambition measured against the vastness of the natural world. The stars above continue their silent procession, and the Milky Way stretches faintly across the sky, a reflection of the wall below, connecting the human endeavor of stone and labor to the eternity of the cosmos. You pause atop a high ridge, looking along the dark serpentine line of towers and walls receding into the night, the wind whispering through the cracks and stones, carrying subtle echoes of centuries past. Each tower, each stone, each curve carries memory, and the wall itself becomes a repository of human courage, patience, and vigilance. It teaches endurance not through noise or spectacle, but through the quiet, unbroken passage of time. As you move forward, the wall narrows and rises steeply, demanding careful steps and constant attention, each movement a connection to the generations who made this structure a reality. The valleys remain hidden, the darkness complete, and the wind flows in intermittent waves, whispering along ridges a low, almost imperceptible song of persistence. The wall is a line of human presence stretched across an indifferent landscape, a witness to history, a monument to effort, and in the night, its lessons are made clear. Patience, resilience, vigilance, and endurance are more powerful than walls themselves. The repetition of towers, the rhythm of the path, the tactile reality of stone beneath your hands and feet, all of it becomes meditative, a slow, deliberate awareness of connection to both the past and the present. As part 23 comes to a close, the wall stretches ahead into darkness, unbroken, unwavering, a testament to centuries of human labor and courage. The stars continue to shine, the wind whispers through towers and ridges, and the Great Wall remains, a monument not only to defense but to endurance, silent yet insistent, a guardian of memory, history, and the quiet, unyielding courage of those who walked it through the longest nights, reminding all who traverse it that presence, patience, and persistence are the truest forms of strength. Part 24 begins in the stillest depth of night, when the Great Wall appears to float between earth and sky, a dark, winding ribbon stretching across the jagged ridges, faintly illuminated by the cold, distant light of countless stars. The mountains around it are swallowed by shadow, leaving only the wall itself as a line of presence in the vast emptiness, a testament to human endeavor carved into the indifferent landscape. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of stone, earth, and distant pine, and each breath feels like inhaling centuries of labor, vigilance, and endurance, compressed into the stones beneath your hands and feet. Walking along the path, the uneven, icy stones demand deliberate attention, and each careful step evokes the memory of countless soldiers who once patrolled this ridge, eyes scanning the darkness, ears attuned to the faintest disturbance, hearts poised between alertness and fatigue. The wall's curves, rises, and descents reveal a purposeful design, as though every bend, every steep incline, every plateau was shaped both by the contours of the mountains and by the strategic demands of defense. Yet the night strips away practical concerns, leaving only the weight of presence, the immensity of human effort standing silently against the sweep of time. You approach a watchtower, its doorway yawning like a sentinel's mouth, dark and cold, swallowing light and sound alike. Stepping inside, the air is heavier, colder, and intimate in its emptiness, and you imagine the soldiers who once filled this space, huddled in thick garments, bracing against both chill and monotony, listening for the smallest hints of movement, straining to distinguish harmless sounds from threats. The torchlight that would have flickered on the walls centuries ago casts its own imagined shadows in your mind, murmurs, footsteps, low voices exchanged, weapons checked, cloaks adjusted, eyes never straying from the horizon. The wall demanded this kind of vigilance, not only of those inside the towers, but along its entire length, and the silence of night amplifies the demand, pressing the weight of history and endurance upon every step you take. Emerging from the tower, the path rises steeply along a ridge, forcing careful, deliberate movement. each stone a reminder of the relentless effort required to construct and maintain this monumental barrier. The wind flows along the ridges in low, resonant waves, slipping through cracks in the stone and echoing faintly off the towers as if the wall itself breathes, alive with memory and the presence of centuries of human labor. The valleys below are invisible, hidden entirely in darkness, and this uncertainty mirrors the dangers that ancient guards would have faced: the unknown movement of enemy forces, the unpredictability of weather, the hidden threats lurking in shadowed passes. The wall transforms those dangers into lessons in patience, presence, and endurance, a physical and mental discipline encoded in every stone, every tower, every curve of the ridge. Each tower passed becomes a milestone in both distance and history, forming a rhythm that is physical, temporal, and meditative. The night magnifies that rhythm, sharpening awareness and reinforcing the continuous connection between past and present, human effort and natural permanence. Walking onward, the wall curves and rises, dips into shadowed valleys, and climbs again, each segment demanding focus, patience, and careful attention. The stars above continue their silent procession, and the faint trace of the Milky Way mirrors the wall below, connecting human effort to the cosmos, ephemeral labor to eternal time. The wall is both demanding and instructive. It teaches endurance through its physical challenges, through its repetition, through its silent insistence on presence. The wind rises intermittently, rustling along ridges, whispering through cracks and towers, carrying echoes of centuries past, reminding you that this structure is not only stone and mortar but memory, discipline, courage, and continuity. Pausing atop a high ridge, you look along the winding line of towers and walls stretching into darkness, the mountains enveloped in shadow, the stars unchanging above. The wall is both immense and intimate, its endurance a lesson that is more profound than its physical strength. Persistence, patience, and vigilance are as vital as any defensive measure, and they are encoded into every stone and every shadow. Continuing along the path, you feel the weight of time pressing gently yet insistently, the rhythm of the wall guiding your steps, the cold stone grounding your presence in history. Every tower, every curve, every rise is a marker of human effort, a testament to the discipline required to withstand not only external threats, but the relentless passage of time. As Part 24 comes to a close, the wall stretches endlessly ahead, dark, unbroken, and unwavering beneath the starlit sky, the wind whispering softly along ridges and towers. The Great Wall remains a monument to endurance, resilience, and the quiet courage of those who walked it, standing unmoved through centuries of night, wind, and history, reminding all who traverse it that the truest strength is measured not in walls themselves, but in the steadfast patience, vigilance, and presence that give those walls meaning and life. Part 25 begins in the profound stillness of the night, when the Great Wall winds across ridges and peaks like a dark river frozen in time, its contours barely illuminated by the faint, cold light of countless stars overhead. The mountains around it have dissolved into shadow, leaving the wall as the sole marker of human presence against the vast, indifferent landscape. The air is crisp and sharp, carrying the scent of stone, earth, and distant forests, each inhalation a reminder of the centuries of labor, vigilance, and endurance embedded in every brick, every worn edge, and every tower. Walking along the uneven stones, you feel their roughness beneath your hands and feet, each step a deliberate act, echoing the care that centuries of soldiers would have taken as they patrolled this ridge in rain, wind, snow, and chill. The wall's curves and rises follow the natural contours of the mountains with a precision born of necessity, yet the night transforms its purpose from defense into a meditation on endurance, presence, and human effort. Each tower you pass is a milestone of both distance and history, standing like silent sentinels against the sky, their dark openings absorbing sound and light alike, suggesting lives once lived within, lives measured by hours of observation, vigilance, and unending routine. Entering one such tower, the air is heavier, colder, almost intimate in its silence. You imagine soldiers huddled here centuries ago, cloaked against the cold, listening to the subtle movements of the night, attuned to every sound, every shift of wind, every crack of stone that might signal danger. Torches would have flickered on the walls, shadows dancing, murmurs exchanged, weapons checked, eyes scanning horizons in a rhythm of endurance that stretched hour upon hour. Stepping back onto the path, the wall continues its winding ascent along ridges and descents into valleys now hidden entirely in darkness. The uneven, icy stones demand careful attention with each step, a tactile connection to the past, a reminder that the wall's endurance is both physical and temporal. The wind rises and falls, moving in low, resonant waves along the ridges and through cracks in the towers, carrying whispers from centuries past, reminders that the wall is not inert but alive with memory and history. The valleys below are obscured in shadow, yet the presence of uncertainty is palpable, as it would have been for the ancient guards, the unseen threats, the hidden movements, the unknown passage of armies or raiders. The wall transforms those uncertainties into lessons in patience, presence, and vigilance, encoded into the structure itself and amplified by the stillness of night. You continue along the ridges, each tower reinforcing a rhythm of endurance, each curve a testament to the labor and foresight that created and maintained this monumental barrier. The night magnifies the details, the rough texture of stone beneath your hands, the faint hum of wind along the ridges, the echo of distant mountains, the subtle shifts of shadow and light, all of which remind you that this wall is more than stone. It is memory, discipline, courage, and continuity. As you ascend a steep section, the air grows colder, biting into exposed skin, and the path narrows, demanding focused, deliberate steps. You feel the continuity of generations who walked this same path, each brick a record of human effort, each tower a repository of vigilance and endurance. Looking across the valleys, invisible in darkness, the mountains seem infinite, and the wall itself appears simultaneously monumental and fragile, a line of human persistence stretched across an indifferent world. The stars above move slowly, steady and eternal, faintly reflected in the stones below, connecting human effort to the vastness of the cosmos, fleeting lives to enduring labor. You pause atop a ridge, listening to the whispering wind, feeling the subtle resonance of centuries beneath your hands and feet, aware that the wall is more than a barrier. It is a narrative of patience, perseverance, and quiet courage. Moving onward, the wall dips and rises again, the towers receding and emerging in the faint starlight, each one a marker of distance, effort, and history. The repetition forms a rhythm both physical and temporal, a meditation on endurance that the night allows to be fully felt. The wind sweeps along the ridges, carrying the echo of countless nights like this one, the silent watch of generations, and the steady presence of stone that has survived empires, weather, and time itself. As Part 25 draws to a close, the wall stretches onward into darkness, unbroken, unwavering, and eternal beneath the starlit sky. The towers stand like sentinels, the ridges wind endlessly, and the mountains remain submerged in shadow. The Great Wall's power lies not in conquest or defense alone, but in its steadfast endurance, its quiet testimony to the resilience, vigilance, and presence of those who built and patrolled it, and in the night, that power is most apparent, a silent, unyielding testament to human courage, patience, and the ability to endure through the longest, coldest, and most profound hours of darkness. Part 26 begins in the profound quiet of night, when the Great Wall winds across ridges and peaks like a dark, unbroken river of stone, stretching endlessly into shadow, and the stars above glimmer coldly, casting a fragile light upon the weathered bricks. The mountains around it have disappeared into darkness, leaving only the wall as a visible trace of human presence against the vast, indifferent landscape. The air is crisp, sharp, and alive with the scent of earth, pine, and cold stone, each inhalation carrying a weight of centuries, a reminder of the labor, vigilance, and patience embedded into every brick and every tower along the line. Walking along the uneven, icy stones, you feel the roughness beneath your hands and the subtle incline beneath your feet, each step a deliberate act that echoes the careful movements of the soldiers who once patrolled these heights, their eyes scanning the horizon for hours, their ears attuned to the faintest disturbance, their hearts poised between fatigue and alertness. The wall's curves, ascents, and descents follow the natural contours of the mountains with meticulous care, yet at night, its function transcends defense, becoming a meditation on presence, endurance, and human endeavor. Each tower you pass stands as a milestone, similar in structure yet unique in its wear and shadows, a silent sentinel holding the memory of lives that moved within and around it, lives defined by vigilance, labor, and the unceasing passage of time. Entering one of these towers, the air inside is heavier, colder, almost intimate in its silence, and you imagine soldiers huddled here centuries ago, bracing against both the cold and the monotony, listening to the whispers of the night, feeling the weight of duty pressing on their shoulders, their eyes never straying from the horizon. The flicker of imagined torchlight casts shadows on the walls, revealing faint echoes of movements, murmurs, and the disciplined rhythm of lives lived in attention to both the visible and the unseen. Stepping back onto the path, the wall rises again along steep ridges, the stones worn and uneven, requiring careful, deliberate steps, and the wind moves in low, resonant waves along the ridges and through the towers, carrying subtle murmurs of the centuries past. The valleys below are hidden in darkness, yet the uncertainty that they imply mirrors the challenges the ancient guards faced: unseen threats, unpredictable weather, and the constant vigilance demanded by an unknown enemy. The wall transforms this uncertainty into a lesson in patience and presence, encoded into its very structure, and the night magnifies the effect, sharpening the senses and making every movement, sound, and shadow significant. Continuing along the ridge, the repetition of towers and curves forms a rhythm both physical and temporal, a cadence that reflects the endurance required to construct, maintain, and guard this monumental boundary. The night allows that rhythm to be fully experienced, every step a meditation, every tower a marker of perseverance and history. The wall rises and dips along the terrain, forcing attentiveness, grounding you in both the present and the past, and making the physical challenges of the path a connection to the centuries of human effort embedded into its stones. Looking out across the invisible valleys, the mountains seem infinite, and the wall itself embodies both fragility and permanence, a record of human persistence stretched across a landscape that remains indifferent to time and effort. The stars above trace their silent path, the faint Milky Way reflecting the wall's winding course below, connecting fleeting human lives to the vastness of the cosmos and making the endurance of labor tangible through the continuity of stone. Pausing atop a high ridge, you feel the wall's weight beneath your hands, the wind whispering along cracks and gaps, resonating faintly with the memory of countless nights like this one, each filled with vigilance, patience, and quiet courage. Moving forward, the path dips and rises again, each tower reappearing like a marker of distance, effort, and time, and the repetition forms a steady rhythm, a meditation on endurance that night allows to be fully felt. The wind rises again, sweeping through the ridges and towers, carrying faint echoes of centuries past, reminding you that the wall is more than stone. It is memory, discipline, and presence manifested, teaching endurance through both its demands and its silent testimony. As Part 26 draws to a close, the wall stretches ahead into darkness, unbroken and steadfast beneath the starlit sky, the towers standing like sentinels, the ridges winding endlessly, the mountains submerged in shadow. Its power lies not in conquest or defense alone, but in its ability to endure, to hold time, memory, and human effort across centuries, and in the night, that endurance is most apparent, a silent, unyielding testament to courage, patience, and the quiet, unrelenting vigilance of those who walked it, reminding all who traverse it that true strength is measured not by walls themselves, but by the persistence, patience, and presence that give them life. Part 27 begins in the absolute stillness of night, when the Great Wall stretches like a dark ribbon over the rugged mountains, winding endlessly through ridges and valleys that have disappeared into shadow, and the stars above shine cold and distant, their faint light reflecting softly on the uneven stones beneath your feet. The air is sharp and crisp, carrying the scent of stone, earth, and distant forests, and each inhalation feels heavy with centuries of labor, vigilance, and quiet endurance embedded in every brick, every tower, every worn edge of this monumental structure. Walking along the uneven, icy stones, each step is deliberate, requiring careful attention, and you feel the presence of countless soldiers who once patrolled these heights, their eyes scanning the horizon, ears attuned to the faintest sound, hearts balanced between alertness and fatigue. The wall itself is more than a line of defense. At night, it becomes a meditation on human perseverance, an enduring testament to discipline and resilience. Each tower you pass rises like a silent sentinel against the starlit sky, its dark doorway absorbing both light and sound, a space that once sheltered soldiers bracing against cold, monotony, and the constant vigilance required to protect an empire. Entering one of these towers, the interior is heavy and intimate, the cold pressing against your skin, and you can imagine the soldiers of centuries past huddled in cloaks, listening to subtle shifts of wind, distant echoes, and the soft groan of stone as the wall settled around them. Torchlight would have flickered across the walls, revealing shadows that danced like memories of their presence, murmurs, footsteps, the quiet rhythm of preparation, the adjustments of weapons, the scanning of horizons that never truly ended. Exiting the tower, the wall continues its rise along steep ridges, demanding deliberate, measured steps, each movement connecting you physically to those who maintained vigilance across the centuries. The wind flows in waves, rising and falling along ridges and through cracks in the stone, carrying faint echoes of the past, a reminder that the wall is not inert but alive with memory and persistence. The valleys below remain shrouded in darkness, creating an infinite sense of space and the same uncertainty that soldiers would have faced, unknown dangers, hidden movements, and the ever-present need for watchfulness. The wall transforms uncertainty into a lesson in patience, alertness, and enduring presence, encoded into its structure and amplified by the silence of night. Moving forward, the repetition of towers and curves forms a rhythm that is both physical and temporal, a cadence of endurance reflecting the long, deliberate labor that created and preserved this barrier. The night magnifies that rhythm, giving weight and significance to each step, each tower, each shadow. The path rises and dips along the natural contours of the mountains, forcing attention and focus, connecting your present movement to the labor and vigilance of countless generations. From a high ridge, the wall stretches onward, and the mountains appear infinite, the valleys hidden beneath a blanket of darkness. The wall itself is monumental and fragile, a record of human persistence in an indifferent landscape, a testament to effort, foresight, and resilience. The stars above move slowly and silently, faintly mirrored in the path below, tying human labor to the eternity of the cosmos, fleeting lives to enduring structures. Pausing atop another ridge, you feel the wall's weight beneath your hands and feet, the wind whispering softly along cracks, gaps, and towers, carrying the resonance of centuries of nights like this one, filled with vigilance, patience, and quiet courage. As you continue along the winding path, the wall dips and rises, the towers reappearing like markers of both distance and history, reinforcing a rhythm that is meditative and instructive. Each step is a lesson in endurance. Each tower, each curve, each worn stone reminds you that human presence and effort can persist, leaving traces that survive even the longest nights. The wind rises and falls along ridges, echoing faintly against towers and stones, a subtle song of continuity and resilience. The wall is memory made physical, discipline made tangible, and presence made eternal, teaching endurance through both its demands and its silent, unyielding testimony. As Part 27 concludes, the wall stretches endlessly into darkness, unbroken and steadfast beneath the starlit sky, the towers standing like sentinels, ridges winding without end, and the mountains submerged in shadow. Its power is not only in its physical form but in its ability to endure, to hold history, labor, and human courage across centuries. In the night, its enduring strength is most apparent, a silent, unwavering testament to patience, vigilance, and the quiet, persistent courage of those who walked it, reminding all who traverse it that true strength is measured not in walls alone but in the steadfast presence, endurance, and vigilance that give those walls life. Part 28 begins in the profound stillness of the night, when the Great Wall stretches endlessly across jagged ridges and hidden valleys, a dark, winding ribbon of stone under a sky scattered with cold, distant stars. The mountains surrounding it have dissolved into shadows, leaving the wall as the only visible testament to human presence across a vast, indifferent landscape. The air is sharp and crisp, carrying the scent of earth, stone, and distant pine, and every breath feels weighted with centuries of labor, vigilance, and endurance embedded in every brick, every worn edge, every tower. Walking along the uneven stones, each step is deliberate, demanding attention, and you sense the countless soldiers who once patrolled these heights, their eyes scanning the horizon, ears attuned to the faintest sound, hearts poised between fatigue and alertness. The wall itself is more than a defensive structure. In the night, it becomes a meditation on human perseverance, an enduring testament to discipline, patience, and the quiet strength required to withstand both time and threat. Each tower you pass rises like a sentinel against the starlit sky, its dark doorway absorbing both light and sound, a space that once sheltered men bracing against cold, monotony, and the unrelenting weight of duty. Entering one of these towers, the interior is heavy and intimate, the cold pressing against your skin, and you imagine soldiers huddled here centuries ago, listening to the soft shifts of wind, the subtle echoes of distant ridges, and the faint creak of stone settling beneath the weight of the wall. Torchlight would have flickered against the walls, casting shadows that danced like memories. The murmur of voices, the careful adjustment of weapons, the slow, deliberate steps of men on patrol, eyes never straying from the horizon, ears straining to detect the faintest sound. Stepping back onto the path, the wall rises along a steep ridge, demanding careful movement, each step a connection to centuries of human effort, each stone a repository of labor, endurance, and discipline. The wind flows intermittently, rustling through cracks and towers, carrying faint whispers from the past, a reminder that the wall is alive with memory, a structure sustained by human persistence as much as by stone. The valleys below are hidden entirely in shadow, evoking the same uncertainty that soldiers once faced, the unknown movements of enemies, the unpredictability of weather, the constant vigilance required to guard an empire. The wall translates this uncertainty into a lesson in patience and presence, encoded into its very structure and amplified by the silence of night. Continuing along the ridge, the repetition of towers, walls, and curves forms a rhythm both physical and temporal, a cadence of endurance reflecting the labor and discipline that created and preserved this boundary. The night magnifies every detail, the rough texture of stone beneath your hands, the faint echo of wind along ridges, the distant resonance of mountains, and the subtle play of shadows, all of which transform the wall into a living presence, a witness to both time and human determination. As you ascend another steep incline, the air grows colder, and the path narrows, forcing careful, deliberate steps, a physical echo of the vigilance and resilience demanded of those who once walked this path. Looking across the hidden valleys, the mountains seem infinite, and the wall embodies both permanence and fragility, a record of human effort stretched across an indifferent world. The stars above move silently, and the faint trace of the Milky Way mirrors the winding course of the wall below, tying fleeting human lives to the permanence of the cosmos, connecting past labor to enduring structures. Pausing atop a high ridge, You feel the weight of the wall beneath your hands, the wind whispering softly along towers and cracks, resonating with centuries of nights like this one, filled with vigilance, patience, and quiet courage. As you move forward, the wall dips and rises, towers appearing and disappearing in starlight, each a marker of distance, effort, and history, forming a rhythm that is meditative and instructive. Every step reinforces the lesson embedded in the wall. Endurance, patience, and vigilance are the true measure of strength. The wind rises again, sweeping along the ridges, echoing faintly against stone and towers, carrying subtle reminders of centuries past. The wall is memory made physical, discipline made tangible, and presence made eternal, teaching through both its demands and its silent testimony. As Part 28 draws to a close, the wall stretches into the darkness, unbroken and unwavering beneath the starlit sky, towers standing like sentinels, ridges winding endlessly, mountains submerged in shadow. Its power lies not only in its physical scale or defensive purpose, but in its ability to endure, to hold time, memory, and human effort across centuries. In the night, its strength is most apparent, a silent, unyielding testament to patience, courage, and the quiet, steadfast vigilance of those who walked it, reminding all who traverse it that true strength is measured not by walls alone but by the persistence, endurance, and presence that give them life. Part 29 begins in the profound silence of night, when the Great Wall stretches endlessly across jagged ridges and shadowed valleys, a dark, winding ribbon under a sky filled with cold, distant stars whose faint light glimmers on the uneven stones beneath your feet. The mountains around it have vanished into darkness, leaving only the wall as a testament to human presence, labor, and vigilance across an otherwise indifferent landscape. The air is sharp and crisp, carrying the scent of stone, earth, and distant pine, each breath weighted with centuries of toil, endurance, and quiet courage embedded in every brick, every worn edge, every tower along the wall's path. Walking along the icy, uneven stones, every step is deliberate, demanding awareness, and you sense the countless soldiers who once patrolled these heights, their eyes scanning the horizon, ears attuned to the faintest sound, hearts balanced between fatigue and alertness. The wall at night transcends its physical purpose. It becomes a meditation on human perseverance, a silent monument to patience, discipline, and enduring presence. Each tower you pass rises like a sentinel against the starlit sky, its dark doorway absorbing both light and sound, a space that once sheltered soldiers bracing against cold, monotony, and the constant vigilance required to guard an empire. Entering one of these towers, the air inside is heavier, colder, and intimate in its silence, and you can imagine the soldiers of centuries past, huddled against the chill, listening for subtle shifts of wind, distant echoes, and the faint creak of stone settling beneath the weight of the wall. Torchlight would have flickered against the walls, casting shadows that danced like memories. Murmurs exchanged, weapons adjusted, eyes scanning the horizon without respite, every movement and sound demanding awareness and caution. Stepping back onto the ridge, the wall ascends and descends along the natural contours of the mountains, the uneven, icy stones forcing careful steps, a physical echo of the vigilance required of ancient guards. The wind rises and falls in low, resonant waves along ridges and through towers, carrying faint echoes of centuries past, whispering reminders that the wall is alive with memory, human effort, and resilience. The valleys below are hidden in darkness, evoking the same uncertainty that soldiers once faced, unseen dangers, unknown movements, and the ever-present need for alertness. The wall transforms that uncertainty into lessons in patience, endurance, and presence, encoded into its stones, towers, and curves, magnified by the absolute silence of night. Continuing along the ridges, the repetition of towers, walls, and winding paths forms a rhythm both physical and temporal, a cadence of human labor, persistence, and discipline stretching across centuries. The night amplifies this rhythm, giving weight and significance to each step, each tower, each shadowed curve. Rising and dipping along the terrain, the path demands attentiveness, grounding you in both the present and the past, and making the physical effort a connection to the countless lives that maintained vigilance here. Looking across hidden valleys, the mountains appear infinite, and the wall embodies both fragility and permanence, a testament to human persistence in a landscape that remains indifferent to time and effort. The stars above trace their silent path, faintly mirrored in the winding wall below, linking ephemeral human lives to the permanence of the cosmos, connecting past labor to enduring structures. Pausing atop a ridge, you feel the wall's weight beneath your hands and feet, the wind whispering along towers and cracks, resonating with centuries of nights like this one, each filled with vigilance, patience, and quiet courage. Moving onward, the wall dips and rises again, towers appearing and disappearing in starlight, each a marker of distance, effort, and time, reinforcing a rhythm that is meditative and instructive. Every step reinforces the lessons embedded in the wall. Endurance, patience, and vigilance are the truest measures of strength. The wind rises again, sweeping along ridges, echoing faintly against stone and towers, carrying subtle reminders of countless generations. The wall is memory made tangible, discipline made physical, presence made eternal, teaching through both its demands and its silent testimony. As Part 29 draws to a close, the wall stretches unbroken into darkness, steadfast beneath the starlit sky, towers standing like sentinels, ridges winding endlessly, mountains submerged in shadow. Its power lies not only in its scale or defensive purpose, but in its ability to endure, to hold human effort, memory, and courage across centuries. In the night, its enduring strength is revealed, a silent, unyielding testament to patience, vigilance, and the quiet, persistent courage of those who walked it, reminding all who traverse it that true strength is measured not by walls themselves, but by the steadfast presence, endurance, and vigilance that give them life. Part 30 begins in the profound darkness of night, when the great wall stretches like a silent, serpentine shadow over the rugged mountains, disappearing and reappearing along ridges that are barely visible under the faint glimmer of countless stars. The mountains have merged with the darkness, leaving the wall as the lone trace of human presence across an otherwise vast, indifferent landscape, a testament to labor, vigilance, and endurance spanning centuries. The air is sharp, crisp, and alive with the scent of stone, earth, and distant pine, each breath a tangible reminder of the lives that built, maintained, and guarded this monumental structure. Walking along the uneven, icy stones, every step requires careful attention, connecting you physically and mentally to the soldiers who once patrolled these heights, their eyes scanning horizons for hours, ears straining to detect the faintest sound, hearts balanced between fatigue and constant alertness. The wall itself becomes more than a defensive line at night. It transforms into a meditation on human perseverance, a living monument to patience, discipline, and quiet courage. Each tower you pass rises like a silent sentinel against the starlit sky, its dark doorway absorbing light and sound, a space that once sheltered men bracing against both the cold and the monotony of unceasing vigilance. Entering one of these towers, the interior is heavy, intimate, and chillingly quiet, and you can almost feel the soldiers of centuries past huddled within, listening to the subtle movements of the wind, the distant echo of mountains, the faint creak of stone settling beneath the immense weight of the wall. The imagined flicker of torchlight casts moving shadows along the walls, revealing murmurs, careful adjustments of weapons, slow pacing, and eyes that never left the horizon, embodying patience, endurance, and a discipline that is both physical and mental. Exiting the tower, the wall continues to rise along ridges, steep in places and uneven in stone, demanding deliberate steps and acute attention, each movement connecting you to the countless individuals whose labor shaped this path. The wind flows intermittently, low and resonant, sweeping through towers, cracks, and ridges, carrying whispers from centuries past, a reminder that the wall is not inert but alive with memory, vigilance, and human effort. The valleys below are concealed entirely in shadow, evoking the same uncertainty that soldiers once faced: unseen movements, hidden dangers, unpredictable conditions, and the ever-present demand for watchfulness. The wall transforms such uncertainty into a tangible lesson in patience, presence, and resilience, encoded in every stone, every tower, every curve, and amplified by the profound silence of night. Continuing along the ridge, the repetition of towers and the undulating path form a rhythm both physical and temporal, a cadence of endurance reflecting the immense labor, foresight, and discipline required to construct and maintain this boundary. The night accentuates this rhythm, giving significance to every step, every tower passed, every shadowed bend along the path. The wall rises and dips with the terrain, forcing focus, grounding you in both the present and the long history of those who walked these stones before. From a high ridge, the wall stretches endlessly into darkness, the mountains vast and infinite, the valleys submerged, and the structure itself embodies both fragility and permanence, a living record of human persistence across a landscape indifferent to time and effort. The stars above move silently, faintly mirrored in the winding path below, connecting fleeting human lives to the eternity of the cosmos, linking past labor to enduring structures. Pausing atop another ridge, you feel the weight of history in your hands and feet, the whispering wind brushing along towers and cracks, resonating with countless nights like this one, each filled with vigilance, patience, and quiet courage. As you continue, the wall dips and rises, towers appearing and disappearing in starlight, each a marker of distance, effort, and time, forming a rhythm that is both meditative and instructive. Each step reinforces the lessons of endurance, patience, and vigilance embedded in this monumental structure. The wind sweeps along ridges and towers, echoing faintly, carrying reminders of centuries past, of human presence, labor, and persistence. The wall is memory made physical, discipline made tangible, and presence made eternal, teaching endurance through both its demands and its silent testimony. As Part 30 concludes, the wall stretches unbroken into darkness, steadfast beneath the starlit sky, towers standing like eternal sentinels, ridges winding endlessly, mountains submerged in shadow. Its power lies not in conquest alone, but in its ability to endure, to hold time, memory, and human effort across centuries. In the night, its strength is most apparent, a silent, unyielding testament to patience, vigilance, and the quiet, persistent courage of those who walked it, reminding all who traverse it that true strength is measured not by walls themselves, but by the presence, endurance, and steadfast vigilance that give them life. And through this enduring presence, the Great Wall continues to whisper the story of human perseverance across the ages, standing eternal against the darkness, time, and indifferent mountains.